Chapter 175. Jade people glide through the snow, flying gracefully through the clouds. The black-clothed man tilted his head and looked at him. And here I thought that everyone in the world knew my name. General Feihong? Hirufei? Huye was shocked and blurted out, "Impossible! Why is it impossible?" The eyes under the mask stared at him, the corners of his mouth curled up in a mocking smile. Why is it impossible? Huye was the bravest general of the Utopia, but at this moment he subconsciously retreated as he yelled, "Charge! Kill this person, and the king will reward you handsomely." Countless arrows and silhouettes rushed up, but the masked man easily dodged every blade and arrow that rushed towards him. He was like a swan flying through the snow, spreading his wings to create a world of his own. There was nothing that could trap him. His sword was even more invincible. It danced and circled around in the night sky, as if it could even cut through the drizzle. Huye could not help but believe one thing. This was indeed General Feihong, Hirufei. In the world, other than Hirufei, no one else had such exquisite swordsmanship. Huye had never fought Hirufei before, but he had heard from the defeated Western Chang soldiers that Hirufei's azure gem sword could cut through all obstacles. But why would Hirufei appear here? He clearly could not be like this. Could this be another scheme of the Dawei? Hirufei had tricked them? These cunning and despicable Dawei people. "I want to kill him," Huye said hatefully. He shouted to the people beside him, "Bring me my bow and arrows." He wanted to personally kill this bird that could still fly. He wanted to see this swan fall from the sky, fall to the ground, and be trampled into the mud by him. The bow and arrows were handed to him, and he aimed at the black-clothed man who was surrounded by the Utopia soldiers. He could not aim at the target no matter how hard he tried. He roared, "Idiots, back off a little." As soon as he finished speaking, the arrow in his hand was released. However, from the depths of the shrubs, a few more arrows were shot out, blocking his arrow in the middle. "There's an accomplice. Catch them." At this moment, another man wearing a devil mask jumped out from the bushes. He laughed and threw a bucket-like object in the direction of the black-clothed man. The sword-wielding man in black only managed to grab the wooden barrel in midair, but the arrows of the Uchuo soldiers had already arrived. General Feihong moved so quickly that no one could see him clearly. He only used the wooden barrel to block his eyes like an iron shield. When the arrow hit the wooden barrel that he used as a shield, something like water flowed out. Huye immediately cried out in his heart when he saw this and said, "Stop! Everyone stop!" But even if the archer stopped immediately, the arrow that was shot out could not be returned. In the blink of an eye, the wooden barrel in General Feihong's hands had already been shot into a sieve. The water spurted out from within and sprayed over the entire supply camp. Immediately after, they heard her whistle. The sound was clear and melodious. From the bushes, from all directions in the darkness, dozens and hundreds of arrows suddenly shot out. The arrows carried fire and fell on the ointment sprinkled on the pile of fodder. With a boom, the fire soared to the sky. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. He had done something like setting fire not long ago in Jiang, so Hien was already very familiar with it. Huye was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He only ordered the soldiers to put out the fire and kill the people. However, this was not Jiang, and rivers were not everywhere. The place where the camp was set up was not far from the river, but it was definitely not close either. Hien was slightly relieved. These ointments were the last of the ointments used to make fireworks in the Rundu. Although it was raining tonight, the rain was not heavy. However, the wind was very strong. As long as the wind blew, there was no need to worry about the fire not rising. In the end, these tents would be in danger. "Now," Hien shouted, "don't retreat, fight." The sounds of fighting and the flames from all directions rang out. Huye looked around. The appearance of Dawei wearing devil masks from all directions had already caused the Uchuo soldiers to panic and their morale to be unstable. Now that the rations were burning, some people were busy getting water to put out the fire. Not to mention the formation, even the pace of killing the Dawei was disrupted. Huye was so angry that he almost vomited blood. All of this was because of Hirufei. Hirufei. He looked around and did not see Hirufei's shadow. His heart trembled as he shouted angrily, "Catch Hirufei for me. I want to personally cut off his head." In the camp, the soft cries of women could be heard. Suddenly, the tent flap was opened, and two devil-like faces appeared in the tent. The women let out a short, "Ah," but before they could say anything, their mouths were covered by one of the men. That man took off his mask, revealing a fierce face with a scar. However, it was not the face of Yudo. He said impatiently, "We are Dawei's men. We are here to save you. Put on your clothes and leave quickly." The women in the tent were all disheveled. Two of them had already fallen to the ground and were no longer breathing. Jiang Jiao looked at them and sighed in his heart. When they arrived, Huyate was causing trouble inside, doing some beastly things to the female Rundu prisoners. Hien could not delay the burning of the rations, so he left. However, he did not let it go. Once the rations were burned, he asked the two of them to come and take a look. At first, he thought that Hien was too soft-hearted. Now that he saw the miserable corpses in the camp, even a bandit like Wang Ba could not bear it. He could not help but clench his fists and curse Yudo for being worse than a beast. The women quietly followed Wang Ba and Huyate out of the tent. The Yudo soldiers were all gathered at the rations, so no one noticed them. Jiang Jiao asked, "Can brother hold on for that long?" Wang Ba sneered, "He is much better at being a hero than you and me. He went to save the other prisoners." The Dawei prisoners' tents were small and tattered. They could barely shelter them from the wind and rain. Dozens of women were squeezed together, their clothes barely covering their bodies. All of them looked miserable, and the tent was filled with the smell of blood and decay. It was nauseating. Every time the Wutuo people ravaged these women, the dead ones would be thrown into the river, and the living ones would be thrown back with scars all over their bodies. After a few days, they would experience a life worse than death until they died. When they suddenly saw someone come to save them, these women could not believe their eyes. "Let's go," Hien said. "I will save you all." The leader of the women trembled as she asked, "Warrior, what is your name?" "Are you General Fei Hong?" The masked man did not move, but after a moment, he took off his mask, revealing a handsome young face. His voice was calm. "No, my name is Hien, Wuan Lang, personally appointed by His Majesty." The rhythm of the Utho soldiers was completely disrupted. The masked away soldiers did not continue fighting. When they saw that the rations were about to be burned, they turned around and rushed towards the city gate. On top of the city gate, there were already ropes hanging down. Countless archers were lying in ambush on top of the city gate. Once the Yudo soldiers got close, they would use the arrows they borrowed from the Yudo a few days ago to kill them. The Yudo could not get close, but the masked men were able to escape unscathed. They took the captives away. Someone shouted. Huyate flew into a rage. "A bunch of trash. Can't even keep an eye on the women." The Yudo soldiers also felt wronged. Who would have thought that at a time of life and death, there would be people who would pay attention to these worthless women? They were just spoils of war for the enemy and would only drag them down. If they were in Yudo, even if they were saved, they would still be killed. Women who had been defiled by the enemy had no right to live in this world. It would be fine if the captives wished to die in the enemy's camp, but who would have thought that there would be people who would use all sorts of methods to save these women? The subordinate hesitantly said, "I heard that General Fei Hong, Hirufei, never hurts women. If someone kidnaps Dawei's women, as long as he is there, he will save them." Huyate kicked him back. "Bastard. I've said it before. How could Hirufei come to the Rundu?" The smell of burning food came from the wilderness. From time to time, Yudo soldiers would carry buckets of water to water them, but the wind and fire were strong, so it was futile. Huyate looked in the direction of the Rundu's city gate. Countless archers were lying in ambush on top of the city gate. From time to time, arrows with torches would be fired in this direction as a warning. His face darkened, and he gritted his teeth. "Rundu, I will flatten the Rundu. I will destroy the Rundu, young and old." Hien was the last one to go up the city gate. In order to protect the women, she had to first pull the rope back. She had to deal with the Yudo soldiers at the city gate until she had the chance to return to the city. Even though the archers used arrows to force the Yudo back off, she was still injured. When there was war, there would be sacrifices. It was already good enough that she was still alive. The women who were lucky enough to escape from the enemy camp sat on the city gate in a daze until they could no longer hear the sound of the Yudo's horn. Only then did they come back to their senses. Slowly, they covered their faces with their hands and began to cry. The Rundu soldiers behind the city gate had already taken off their masks. After a night of surprise attack, everything was tense. Only now did they seem to understand what really happened. Some of them were crying, while others were laughing and shouting. We burned their provisions. Those Yudo were beaten into idiots by us. Ha ha! We won against the Yudo. To say that they won was naturally an exaggeration. However, this night attack was indeed a victory, and it was a complete victory. The number of Yudo casualties was unknown. Hien had brought 500 elite soldiers, but 46 were sacrificed and 273 were injured. For the Rundu soldiers who had been guarding the city for more than a month, this was already the best situation. Li Kuang looked at the elite soldiers who were lying on the ground in disbelief and muttered, "They actually did it." When Hien brought these people, Li Kuang actually did not approve of it. He was almost prepared for Hien and these hundreds of people to die. They were just sending themselves to death. As for burning the Yudo's food, Li Kuang also thought that it was very unlikely. However, these things that were impossible in his eyes had now become reality. They even brought back the captives that the Yudo captured outside the city. Li Kuang's heart suddenly lit up with new hope. All along, he did not think that the Rundu soldiers could compete with the Yudo. He thought that they could only defend the city gate and wait for reinforcements. But now, he had made him see another possibility. What if the Yudo could not hold on? Without food, the Yudo would not be able to hold on for long. Their advantage would no longer exist. Now, they were only relying on their advantage in numbers. As for numbers, didn't that young Muan Lang, Hien, already win 2 battles with fewer people? Thinking about this, Li Kuang looked at Hien excitedly. He saw that the young man was leaning against the wall of the building. He did not have time to take off his mask and was looking at the rescued women who were crying together. Li Kuang could not see Hien's expression, but he could see the smile at the corner of his mouth. He was very relieved. In an instant, the scene in front of Li Kuang overlapped with the scene in the past. He still vaguely remembered the time when he fought a battle with Hirufei, who was still a deputy general. That person was also like this. He sat quietly on the ground and looked at the crying and laughing soldiers. The sharpness on the battlefield was restrained, and he was incredibly gentle. He really looked like Hirufei. Li Kuang thought silently. To be more precise, he looked like Hirufei in the past. Hirufei in the past. How are you? Li Kuang walked over. Hien raised his head and looked at him. The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm okay. Just a little tired. He and the elite soldiers did not rest for the whole night. Li Kuang said, "Rest for a while." Hien nodded and stood up. He thought of something and said to Li Kuang, "Lord Li, please ask people to find out if these rescued women still have family in the city. If they do, please ask them to bring them home. If they don't have family, please help them settle down." Li Kuang frowned slightly and did not say anything. Hien seemed to know what he was thinking. He said lightly, "No matter what Lord Li thinks, they are still the Wei's citizens and Rundu citizens. Since you're the commander of the city, you can't sit back and do nothing. The responsibility of the people on the battlefield is to protect the citizens of every inch of the country. It doesn't matter if they are rich or poor or what they have encountered." She stared at Li Kuang, as if insisting that Li Kuang give her an answer. Li Kuang paused and said, "I understand." Hien nodded to him. "Thank you." She went down the gate tower without saying anything. Hien lived in the residence arranged by Zhao Shiming. She was now Muan Lang, so she could use Muan Lang's privilege to live in a room alone. She asked the servants in the residence for a basin of hot water and went into the house. The servants quickly brought the hot water in. Hien locked the door, took off her mask, and pulled down her clothes. Her back, shoulders, and arms were all injured. Some were grazed by swords, and some were from arrows. Last night, she was at the front line and burned the Yudo's provisions. Hundreds of arrows were fired at her, so it was impossible for her to escape unscathed. But now, she was already in good condition. She soaked the handkerchief in hot water and wiped her wounds. The wounds on her back and shoulders were the deepest, but the wounds on her waist were not as bad. Thanks to Lin Shuanghe's scar removal and muscle revitalization ointment. This time, she brought the remaining scar removal and muscle revitalization ointment with her to the Rundu. The wounds on her shoulders and waist were almost used up, and there was no more ointment left in the box. After changing into clean clothes, she looked at herself in the mirror. The youth in the mirror had a pale face. The biggest advantage of the mask and black clothes was that the soldiers couldn't see the blood stains and wounds. They also couldn't see her face clearly. She was always in high spirits, always moving forward, and always being the one who boosted the morale of the soldiers. Ian looked at her arm. Her sleeve was half rolled up, and there was a knife wound on her arm. However, she had already used up all the medicinal powder she brought with her. Just as she was about to wrap the wound with a white cloth, someone knocked on the door. It was a woman's voice, Xiaohe official. Ian said, "Please come in." The person who came in was a young and beautiful girl. She had a smile on her face, and there was a small dimple on her left cheek, which made her charming and lively. She walked over and handed Ian a round bottle. She smiled and said, "I saw Xiaohe official asking for hot water when you came in. I reckon that Xiaohe official is injured. This is the leftover wound ointment that master usually uses." This concubine brought it over. Her gaze landed on the scar on Hian's arm. "Ah," she exclaimed, "Xiaohe Darren, are you really injured?" Hian smiled. "It's just a small injury. It's nothing." "That won't do." The girl came forward as if they were close friends. She wanted to get closer, but she seemed to be aware of her special status and didn't dare to get too close. She stood to the side and comforted. "If you don't treat a small injury, it will drag on and become a big injury. My master's like this. Sometimes when he gets injured on the battlefield, he can't be bothered to treat it. When it becomes an old injury, it will be difficult for him to recover." Hian looked at her young and beautiful face, and her heart was filled with emotions. She knew this girl. This girl was Li Kuang's favorite concubine. Her name was Iluo. When she and Li Kuang fought against the Western Chong people, Iluo was very familiar with her. It was because this girl was exceptionally clever and knew how to please Li Kuang. At that time, Hian thought that if she was a man, she would also dote on this kind of girl wholeheartedly. At that time, Iluo was only 16 years old. She was very young and her face was round. 3 or 4 years later, she grew up a little. Her childishness dissipated and her round face became an oval face. Only the dimple on her left cheek and this sweet smile remained unchanged. "Xiaohe official, why are you looking at me?" Iluo touched her face. Her eyes turned and she said crisply, "I'm beautiful. My family's master dotes on me the most." Hian couldn't help but laugh. Iluo loved to boast about this in the past, and she still loved to boast about this now. This sentence made her feel as if she had returned to the past. "What are you laughing at?" Iluo asked. "Am I ugly?" No. Hian waved his hand. "I just remembered some things from the past." At that time, Iluo was too cute and clever. Hian couldn't help but think of her as his own little sister. He was her biological little sister, but because of the complicated relationship between the He family, He wasn't close to her. At that time, Iluo was beautiful and clever. He felt that Iluo wasn't worth it. If this kind of girl was to get married, she should find a young man who was similar in appearance to her. As for Li Kuang, it wasn't that he didn't like this colleague of his. It was just that Li Kuang was old enough to be Iluo's father. He was serious and straightforward, and he wasn't considerate. He didn't know what Iluo saw in him. At that time, Iluo held her cheeks and giggled. She said to Hian, "Everyone in my family is a servant. Deputy General, he is a talented and handsome young man. How could he marry a servant as his wife? If I marry another servant, I'll give birth to a child who will still be a servant in the future. As a servant, I'll have to depend on the master. If I accidentally annoy the master, I'll lose my life. What's so good about that?" It's better to follow Master. I'll eat my fill and wear warm clothes. I only need to please Master, and I won't be afraid of others bullying me. What you said is false. I'll just treat this as a job. Being Master's concubine is easier than doing the jobs you mentioned. Moreover, Master is a straightforward person and doesn't like to beat around the bush. I won't have to scheme against him. It's very good. Deputy General, you and Master are both people who protect the people of Dewey. You're both heroes. If I become Master's concubine, I'll be a hero's woman. I don't think there's anything bad about this. I'm living a much better life than before. I don't have many wishes in this life. I just hope that 10 years from now, I'll still be Master's favorite concubine. I hope that 10 years from now, I won't grow old and no other vixens will steal Master's favor and pity from me. If that's the case, I'll be very grateful to Guanyin Yang Yang. Ian felt at that time that this girl was quite insightful. Everyone had their own thoughts. Iluo was happy as long as she was happy. Looking at it now, 10 years was unknown. However, 3 years had passed. It seemed like she was still Li Kuang's favorite concubine. He even brought her with him to the rundu. She lowered her head and smiled. She sprinkled the medicinal powder that Iluo brought onto the wound on her arm. Iluo looked curiously and couldn't help but ask, "Xiaohe official, you don't look old. Why are you like my master?" "You didn't make a sound when you applied the medicine? Don't tell me that you warriors who fight don't know pain. It's not that it doesn't hurt." Ian said, "I think that when your master applied the medicine, it should be very painful. It's just that he didn't want to cry out in front of you." Iluo laughed. "Xiaohe official, your words are really interesting." Ian finished applying the medicinal powder and returned the bottle to Iluo, saying, "Miss Iluo, thank you for the medicine." Iluo took the bottle and didn't leave immediately. She looked at Ian and said, "Xiaohe official, it's just some medicine. You don't have to thank me. I should be the one thanking you." "What are you thanking me for?" "Thank you for coming up with a brilliant plan last night to burn the Yudo's provisions and help us vent our anger. Also, thank you for saving those women." She lowered her head and smiled helplessly. "I know those women who were kidnapped by the Yudo. If it wasn't for you last night, they wouldn't have been able to return to the rundu alive. No one would care about their lives. Even if my master personally led the troops, he wouldn't care about their lives. However, you are different." She looked at Yin with sparkling eyes. "You brought them back and didn't leave out any of them. I originally thought that how could there be such a young official who was appointed by His Majesty? You must have taken advantage of me on the battlefield. Now I don't think so. You're different from them. You are a good person, a true hero." Chapter 176. Yin smiled and looked at her. "Is it because I saved those captives that I'm a true hero? A true hero will see things that others can't. There are many men who speak up for men, and there are many women who speak up for women," Iluo said, "but there aren't many men who will speak up for women." Yin looked at her serious expression and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. But she wasn't a real man, so she couldn't really give Iluo what she wanted. This was the way of the world. It wasn't something that could be changed in a short period of time. Seeing that Yin was silent, Iluo took the opportunity to say, "Lord Xiaohe, after you left last night, many aunties in the city came to ask me about you. The county magistrate's wife also asked about you. They all said that if you could come back alive, they would like to tell you about their daughter. She doesn't have to marry you. She can be your concubine." Yin couldn't react in time. Facing Iluo's hopeful gaze, Yin could only use his usual excuse. "Thank you for your love, but I already have a sweetheart." "You already have a sweetheart?" Iluo was a little disappointed, but soon became curious. "Who is Lord Xiaohe's sweetheart? Is she beautiful? What kind of person is she?" Hian's mouth curved into a smile. "Yes, she is very beautiful. Her temperament seems very cold, but she's a very gentle person." This young man had always looked calm and gentle, but at this moment, he really showed the shyness and nervousness of a young man his age. Iluo was even more curious. "From what you said, this girl should be very outstanding. Then is she like you?" Ian was stunned and shook his head. "She doesn't like me?" Iluo was shocked. Xiaohe is skilled, handsome, and kind-hearted. Furthermore, He was personally conferred the title of Mu and Lang by His Majesty. Why is he not fond of such a person? He shrugged. Because he's good, and there are people better than me around him. And I have my own things to do, so I don't want to implicate others. Beautiful Silk looked at him and giggled. Lord Xiao, you're good at everything, but this is the only bad thing about you. As long as your sweetheart isn't married yet, it means that things aren't set in stone yet. Then snatch. Back then, when Master wanted to pick a concubine, there were dozens of sisters in our courtyard. Every day, I would appear in front of Master, and every day, I would dress up meticulously. This concubine was the one who fought for the position of Master's favorite concubine. If Lord Xiao he really likes that lady, then don't bother about anything else. Someone better than you might have a higher status than you, but she just had to lose to you. Honest women are afraid of pestering men. If you pester her day and night, who knows when that lady might fall in love with you? He didn't expect to hear the phrase, honest women are afraid of pestering men here. He thought of Jiang's anxiousness at that time and secretly laughed. Iluo seemed to be very enthusiastic about helping her to win her sweetheart's favor and wanted to talk endlessly. He could only stop her. Miss Iluo, thank you for your good intentions, but right now, we can't even protect ourselves. If the Rundu can be defended and the Yudo chased back, I will definitely do as you say. But right now, let's forget about it. Hearing this, Iluo also sighed and said, that's true. She suddenly fell silent and looked gloomy. He felt a little apologetic. This lady was still in high spirits when she came, but after hearing his words, she became so sad. When he thought of this, he took out an apricot from his bag and handed it over. Don't worry, we will definitely defend this place. When Iluo saw the apricot in He-Yan's hand, she was startled at first, but then she happily took it. Lord Xiao, why do you still have candies? I casually grabbed them when we set off from the Liang province guards. He scratched his head. When they left Jiang, Cui Yueji grabbed a lot of Jiang's specialty candied fruits for her. Xiao Ju didn't like to eat these, so she moved all of them to He-Yan's room. When they left, they mostly brought dry biscuits and dry rations. They didn't bring many snacks like these, but He still picked some up, thinking that they wouldn't take up much space anyway. Iluo carefully licked the apricot and happily said to He-Yan, thank you, Lord Xiao. Ever since the Yudo came, this concubine has been starving and full. I don't even have rice to eat, let alone candies. I don't even dare to think about it. Now that I have received Lord Xiao's blessing, I'm really happy. He said, you don't even have rice to eat? It can't be right. The Yudo besieged the Rundu for only a little over a month. How can the city be in such a state? Ever since she came to the Rundu, she and Wang Ba had been eating the dry rations that they brought from the Liang province guards. She knew that the Rundu's rations were tight, but that was because they had to be used by the soldiers guarding the city. These few days, she was so busy that she didn't even have time to stroll around the city. If Iluo hadn't said it herself, He-Yan wouldn't have known that the Rundu was so tense. One had to know that even Iluo didn't have enough to eat, let alone the common people. Iluo bit the apricot and looked at her with wide eyes. Lord Xiao, you don't know. The Yudo soldiers besieged the Rundu for more than a month, but last year there was a snowstorm in the Rundu. After the snowstorm, there was a famine. Even if the Yudo didn't come, the common people in the Rundu would have had a hard time. Not to mention that the roads out of the city are blocked. There wasn't much food in the city to begin with, and all of it was given to the soldiers. The common people have long been starving to the point of eating grass and tree roots. A few days ago, there were already people who died of starvation. What? Ian suddenly sat up. Is this true? I wouldn't dare to lie to Lord Xiao, Iluo said. Otherwise, our Rundu is rich in grapes. Why would Lord Xiao he only give Lord Xiao he a bowl of grapes on the first day you came? That was the last bowl of grapes in the Rundu. The famine in the city was a big deal, but Li Kuang didn't even tell her about such a serious matter. If that was the case, there was no point in defending the city. Li Kuang was waiting for He Rufei, who wouldn't come. On the other hand, the common people of the Rundu were waiting for endless despair and hunger. They were waiting for death. He Yin lowered his eyebrows and put on his shoes without saying a word. Iluo asked, Lord Xiaohe, what do you want to do? I want to see Li Kuang. Li Kuang was checking yesterday's battle report in his room when he suddenly saw He Yin striding in from outside. He was a little surprised and asked, Didn't you go back to your room to rest? Why did you come out again? He Yin sat down on a chair at the side. She was indeed very tired and would feel better if she sat down. She looked at Li Kuang and said, I'm here to ask, were Lord Li's plans after we burned the Yudo's provisions last night? Li Kuang looked at He Yin and cupped his hands. He said sincerely, Yesterday's victory was all thanks to Lord Xiaohe. Now that the Yudo has run out of provisions, I plan to continue waiting for reinforcements. The Yudo will definitely be more anxious than us. If they attack the city by force, we can set a trap. What do you think, Lord Xiaohe? He Yin said, I don't think it's appropriate. Li Kuang frowned. Why? He Yin stared into his eyes. Lord Li intends to enter a stalemate with the Yudo. This is not wrong, but how long can the people in the city last? I'm afraid that they will starve to death before reinforcements arrive. There is not much food left in the city due to this year's snow disaster. Why did Lord Li hide this from me? Li Kuang heard this and did not answer He Yin. Instead, he asked, Who told you this? There are so many people in the Rundu. Does Lord Li think he can hide it? He Yin's eyes were sharp. Even if he can hide it from one person, how can he not know when more and more people starve to death? Last night, when she led the 500 elite soldiers of the Rundu out of the city, she felt that the soldiers of the Rundu were thin and weak. But at that time, she only thought that it was the result of defending the city for days. She only understood when Iluo told her the reason. If the army was already like this, it was a big taboo in war. Defending the city until the people in the city starved to death was not something that had never been written in history books. That was hell on earth. She did not even dare to think about it. Li Kuang was silent for a while. Then he asked Yin, What do you mean? We can't continue to defend the city. My lord and I will lead the Rundu soldiers and fight to the death with the Yudo outside the city. Impossible, Li Kuang answered without thinking. Taking the initiative to attack is the worst plan. We already took the initiative to attack last night. Last night, we had 500 elite soldiers. But the Rundu has 30,000 soldiers. This is the last hope of the Rundu. If we do, as you said, and fight to the death with the Yudo, the city will fall, and all the people in the city will fall into the hands of the Yudo. Brother He and the Yudo have fought twice. It's impossible that you don't know how cruel and vicious the Yudo are. These people will suffer a fate worse than death if they fall into their hands. I'm the commander of the Rundu. Even if all the people in the Rundu starve to death, it's still better than dying under the torture of the Yudo. Who said that we will definitely lose? He Yin frowned. The war hasn't started yet. Anything can happen. We can also be the victorious side. 30,000 against 100,000. How can we win? He Yin said, In the Battle of Jiang, didn't we also win with fewer people? Li Kuang turned around and said coldly, I'm not the commander-in-chief of the Right Army. You're also not General Fei Hong. We can't win this kind of battle with fewer people. But I can win. Li Kuang turned around and looked at her as if he was looking at a child who didn't know how high the sky was. He shook his head and said, Brother He, I admit that you're somewhat powerful. You also have a way to deal with the Yudo. But war is very cruel. It's a matter of the lives of the people in the city. I can't use the lives of the people in the city to earn your military merits. It's fine if we die. After all, we only have one life. But the city gate cannot be broken. I won't take the initiative to fight the Yudo. If they want to attack the city, we will defend. If they are in a stalemate, we will wait for reinforcements to arrive. Li Kuang was like this in the past. He was very conservative when he fought. Ian also knew this very well. But at that time, she was only a deputy general who led tens of thousands of Fuyue army. Now, this is the Rundu. Even if Sir He is Muan Lang, without my permission, you can't order the Rundu's troops. So, don't waste your energy. Li Kuang said coldly. Ian took a deep breath. This Shirtu's temper was bad and stubborn. Even after so many years, it still hasn't changed. She asked, Fine. If we do as Lord Li said and don't attack, but retreat to defend, but there is no food in the city. Sooner or later, everyone will starve to death. You and I both know the situation of the Runda's troops. If this continues, even if the people don't starve to death, the troops will starve to death. For the Udo, if so many Runda's troops die without sacrificing a single soldier, won't it be too easy for them? The troops won't starve to death. Li Kuang's face darkened. I have my own way. Ian asked, What's your way? Li Kuang looked at her and said, You don't need to know. After that, he ignored Ian and walked into the inner room. Ian looked at his back and felt uneasy. Food was not a problem that could be easily solved, but Li Kuang seemed to have a plan. Could it be that there was a secret granary in the Rundu city? But if there was such a granary, how could the Rundu's troops and the Rundu's people suffer from hunger? Ian shook her head and planned to discuss with Jiang Jiao and his men. As soon as she walked out of the door, she bumped into someone. It was the Rundu's county magistrate, Zhao Shiming. Zhao Shiming awkwardly wiped the sweat off his forehead. He looked into the room and said, I wanted to go in, but when I reached the door, I heard you and Lord Li quarreling, so I couldn't go in. He looked at He-Yan's face and comforted her. Xiao He, Lord Xiao He, please don't take Lord Li's words to heart. He has such a temper. He is as stubborn as assured too. He has a good heart, but he doesn't dare to gamble with the lives of the Runda's people. Lord Xiao He, you came from Liangzhou, so you might not know. We people in the Rundu really don't dare to take this risk. I'm not angry. He sighed and said, I just think it's inappropriate. She looked at Zhao Shiming again. Zhao Shiming was the one who hired craftsmen to make the scarecrows and masks. Zhao Shiming, the county magistrate, seemed to be very popular in the Rundu. Now that Li Kuang was dissatisfied with her, He couldn't ask Li Kuang for help. Jiang Jiao and his men had always been by her side, so they couldn't be separated. This Zhao Shiming should have people around him who could be useful, although there weren't many. Lord Zhao, she thought for a moment and bowed deeply to Zhao Shiming. I have something I need your help with. Zhao Shiming was startled and said, Lord Xiao He, please speak your mind. Lord Zhao, do you have people around you who could be used? For example, bodyguards. I want to borrow 2 of them and do something for me. After a pause, she continued, However, this matter needs to be hidden from Lord Li. He can't know about it. Zhao Shiming looked at the young man in front of him. Whether it was for public or private reasons, he had spent more time with Li Kuang, so he shouldn't help He-Yan hide this from Li Kuang. But on the other hand, he believed that this young man didn't have any bad intentions. In fact, he was one of the purest people in the world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to take the risk last night to rescue those women from the enemy's camp. Zhao Shiming didn't have to think for long before he said, No problem. The sky in the Rundu was gloomy, as if the sun hadn't shone for a long time. The entire city was filled with a rotten and old aura. 2 naked boys pushed a corpse out of a house. This corpse was their grandfather, who was placed on a straw mat. His entire body was so thin that every bone in his body could be seen clearly. He had been starved to death. This kind of thing wasn't rare in the Rundu recently. Xiang walked past them and looked at them with a trace of pity in her eyes. They didn't have much food left. 4th young master, if we stay in the Rundu forever, we will also become like this. She reminded him softly. Xu Zhao didn't say anything and just quietly walked forward. Prime Minister Su's people had already left the Rundu long ago. Staying here was the same as waiting for death. No one would take the initiative to enter this city that was bound to fall. Prime Minister Su's people couldn't be found here. Even if he was the 4th young master of the Chu family, when the day came, there wouldn't be any difference. Death was an extremely fair thing. It wouldn't be merciful for a moment just because of one's status. Xiang still wanted to say something. Let's wait a little longer. Chu Zhao interrupted her. Wait? What were they waiting for? Xiang was silent for a moment before she asked. 4th young master, if you are really worried about Miss He, why don't you take her with you? She didn't even inform Xiao Huaijin. She traveled thousands of miles to the Rundu alone just to save the people in the Rundu. Why do you think that she would abandon the people in the city and go with me? Chu Zhao smiled. Ian was a person. If everything was settled, she would probably leave quietly. The more dangerous the situation was, the more impossible it was for her to leave alone. He thought that this was stupid, but sometimes he couldn't help but want to continue watching. He wanted to see what kind of shocking things this girl could do and how far she could go. Xiang lowered her head as she walked. Her voice was soft. "Fourth young master, you can't let go of her?" Chu Zhao smiled faintly. "I just don't want to see her die so easily. If she was alive, there would probably be more interesting things in the world. If she was dead, there would only be one kind of woman in the world." As they were talking, Xiang suddenly said, "Fourth young master, Miss He." Chu Zhao followed her gaze and saw He Yin standing at the end of the street. She was looking at a house in a daze. There was a woman sitting at the door. She was digging in the soil, trying to dig out some edible grass and tree bark. She just stood there quietly. Her eyebrows were furrowed, making it impossible to see her expression clearly. Chu Zhao walked over and said, "Brother He." Only then did He Yin see the two of them. She replied, "Brother Chu, Miss Xiang." Xiang bowed. They walked forward together. Chu Zhao asked, "Brother He, you just had a fierce battle with Yudo last night. Why didn't you rest in your room?" "It's nothing. I just came out for a walk." He Yin replied. Xiang asked, "Has young master he eaten? If not, I still have some dry food in my bag." She sighed. "The Rundu is like this now. We don't have any hot food." He Yin shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry." She really couldn't eat. Chu Zhao thought for a while and said, "Brother He, are you worried about the people in the Rundu? Is it because there's no food in the city?" He Yin looked at him. "Brother Chu, you know about it too? I came to the Rundu earlier than you." Chu Zhao shook his head and smiled. "I have plenty of time. All the people in the Rundu are the same. If Brother Chu can persuade Prime Minister Su." He Yin asked tentatively. He Yin had always been suspicious about Chu Zhao's identity. Although Chu Zhao was Prime Minister Su's student, he didn't seem to work directly with Prime Minister Su. Indeed, the reason why he was able to gain face in front of Chu Linfeng was because of Su Jingfu. However, Chu Zhao often made choices that were contrary to Su Jingfu's original intentions. For example, in Jiang, Chu Zhao sent the military defense map. He was a very opinionated person. It was best not to be enemies with such a person. As long as he didn't show any hostility, she could only be careful. Just like how Chu Zhao wanted to use her, if she could use Chu Zhao to get close to Hirufei, it wouldn't be a bad idea. After all, Hirufei was now crazy to the point of inhumanity. If He Yin wanted to be promoted under Xiao Ju in the past, she had changed her mind a long time ago. She decided not to involve Xiao Ju in this and stay away from Xiao Ju. She would try her best to do this on her own. Chu Zhao's smile faded a little when he heard this. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Brother He, I'm not omnipotent. Prime Minister Su won't listen to my advice." He sounded a little wrong when he said this. He Yin raised his eyebrows. The relationship between Su Jingfu and Chu Zhao seemed to be very meaningful. "I can't help the people of the Rundu. The only thing I can do is to accompany them. However, what does Brother He plan to do?" He looked at He Yin. "You know that the Rundu can't hold on for long. A city without food could only hold on desperately." Li Kuang didn't explain the situation to her immediately. Now that he was unwilling to confront the Yudo head-on, this path seemed to be a dead end. "Will you give up?" he asked. The man's gaze was gentle. It was like the warm wind in the capital during the third lunar month, but it also carried the coldness of spring. He was sober, but he was secretly looking forward to it. He didn't avoid his gaze. She looked straight into his eyes. "Brother Chu, what do you want me to do?" Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. Instead, he smiled. "Why are you still asking me?" He Yin slowly walked forward. "I thought that Brother Chu already had the answer in your heart." After a while, his voice came from the side. "I've never seen anything that can stop Brother He's footsteps. I've also never seen anything that can make Brother He lose hope. You think that I'm omnipotent?" Chu Zhao said, "That's not true. No matter how omnipotent Brother He is, you can't solve the Runda's current emergency. Can you?" He Yin fell silent. Chu Zhao continued, "Brother He, do you know that in the past, when the famine was at its worst, the people in the city would even exchange children for food in order to survive? Cannibalism is an especially terrible thing. If the rundu continues like this, that kind of situation might happen. Ian lowered her head and chuckled softly. Then, she looked into the distance. The streets were empty. The shops had already closed. Most of the edible things had already been found and eaten. It was clearly a lively summer day, but the rundu looked barren. Even the trees on the roadside were bare. The leaves had already been plucked by the hungry people to fill their stomachs. If it wasn't for the hot sun, it wouldn't look like summer at all. It would look more like winter. This also didn't look like the rundu in Hyan's memory. It was small and lively. The grapes were sparkling, and the wine was mellow. The war changed everything. She said softly, "Do you know what's even more terrible than cannibalism?" Chu Zhao was a little surprised. "What is it?" Hyan didn't say anything. She just looked at the lifeless city. She felt powerless and sad. That kind of thing, if she could, she hoped that it wouldn't happen in her life. She didn't want to see it in her life. That was a real hell on earth. Chapter 177. Hyan didn't see Li Kuang for a few days. Li Kuang seemed to be deliberately avoiding him. Hyan couldn't find him, and his subordinates refused to tell Hyan where he was. Hyan blocked Li Kuang a few times, but Li Kuang didn't seem to want to talk to him. Hyan had no choice but to say, "Lord Li, before coming to the rundu, I've already asked someone to ask for reinforcements. Moreover, I've also said that the rundu's troops have a chance to fight against Yudo. Lord Li, why do you want to block your own path to a dead end? This is the rundu, not Liangzhou." Li Kuang's attitude was also very tough, and he wasn't moved by Hyan's words. "Although you're the Mu and Lang personally appointed by His Majesty, you don't have enough power to order me around. Regarding the night attack on the enemy camp, I'm very grateful for your help, but that's it. Whatever I do after this, you don't have to interfere." Hyan looked at him carefully. When he first came to the rundu, although Li Kuang had a worried expression, he was still a little angry. But now, his expression was not right. His eyes were gloomy, as if he had made up his mind about something, and he was stubborn and unshakable. Hyan could tell that his mood was not good, and it wasn't only because of Yudo. "Lord Li, how do you plan to deal with the famine in the city?" Hyan looked at his back and asked. Li Kuang was shocked and said, "I've said it before, I have my own ways. This has nothing to do with you." Hyan walked in front of Li Kuang and looked him in the eyes. "Lord Li, I'm not from the rundu, but I'm very clear about the current situation. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We've burned the provisions of the Wudong people once, so we can kill their soldiers next time. If Lord Li continues to hold on to the idea of mutual destruction, we won't be able to fight this war. This city can't be defended at all." Her words were a little too serious. Li Kuang's face was filled with anger. "What do you know? I know that if Lord Li miscalculates the current situation, he will make the wrong decision." Li Kuang's eyes showed a little impatience. He tried his best to endure, but in the end, he couldn't help but push Hyan away and said, "I know what to do. I don't need you to tell me what to do." He strode out, not giving Hyan a chance to speak. Hyan frowned and stared at his back, the uneasiness in her heart growing stronger. She wasn't dealing with Li Kuang for the first time. Li Kuang's reaction was clearly that of someone who was at the end of the road. Hyan didn't want to believe in her other way, and Hyan couldn't convince him, so she couldn't command the rundu's troops. Even if she knocked Li Kuang unconscious, the rundu's soldiers wouldn't listen to her orders. Li Kuang had been leading these soldiers for too long. Perhaps because of this, he wouldn't choose the risky decision that Hyan mentioned. She slowly walked out of the house with a heavy heart. In the past few days, even Zhao Shiming came out less and less. There was less and less food. It was fine if she didn't walk around with an empty stomach, but once she walked, she would feel even more hungry. She wished that she could turn everything into food and stuff it into her mouth. Hyatt hadn't launched an attack on the rundu yet. After that night's sneak attack and the burning of their provisions, Yudo probably wasn't as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. Hyatt definitely wanted to attack the city immediately, but the existence of General Fei Hong made them a little afraid. But this fear would eventually dissipate, and Hyatt would eventually discover the truth. They only needed to send someone to Huayuan to find out that the rundu was fake. The moment Hyatt found out that General Fei Hong was fake, they would immediately attack the Rundu. So these few days were actually the days that He Yin fought for the Rundu's people. But Li Kuang was stubborn and conservative. As she walked, she bumped into Iluo. Compared to when He Yin first came to the Rundu, this girl looked a little thinner. Her originally egg-shaped face was now sharp from hunger, and she looked less sweet and more charming. But when she saw He Yin, she smiled and showed a familiar smile. "Xiao He Yin, Miss Iluo, did you quarrel with Master?" Iluo pointed outside the door. "I just saw Master angrily rush out." "Xiao He Yin, please don't be angry with Master. Master's temper is a little straightforward, but he is a good person. If he offended Xiao He Yin, I will apologize to Xiao He Yin on behalf of Master." She was thinking of her master wholeheartedly. He Yin smiled bitterly and shook his head. "It's fine. We just have some differences in opinion." Iluo nodded, not fully understanding. He Yin saw that she was holding something that looked like a garland of flowers in her hand and felt a little strange. He asked, "There's still flowers now?" Most of the edible things in the Rundu had already been dug out by the hungry people. How could there still be flowers to make garlands of flowers? Iluo smiled and handed the garland to He Yin. He Yin took it and saw that the garland was very small and exquisite. He didn't know what kind of grass it was made of, but it was dotted with small purple flowers. He Yin went closer to smell it, but Iluo hurriedly stopped him. "You can't smell it, Xiao He Yin. This flower is poisonous." He Yin, poisonous? It's heartbreak grass. The more beautiful it is, the more poisonous it is. Everyone in the Rundan knows this, so no matter how hungry they are, they won't pick it to eat. Otherwise, why would I use it to make garlands of flowers? She sighed again. No matter what, poisonous weeds always grow especially luxuriant. If only the crops in the fields could be like this. Seeing that He Yin didn't say anything, Iluo smiled and said, "Xiao He Yin, are you interested in this garland of flowers? This concubine can teach Xiao He Yin how to make garlands of flowers. Perhaps you can give it to your sweetheart. Your sweetheart will be very happy." She was still thinking about He Yin's imaginary sweetheart. He Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that if she made a garland of flowers and gave it to Xiao Ju would probably think that she was crazy and beat her to death. "Forget it." He Yin shook his head. He doesn't like flowers and grass. I appreciate Miss Iluo's good intentions. Iluo was a little disappointed. She took the garland of flowers from He Yin's hands and said, "All right then, but how can there be no girls who like flowers and grass? When Master picked flowers for me, I was happy for a while." Lordly? He Yin thought. He didn't expect that with Li Kuang's fierce personality, he would pick flowers for his beloved concubine. "That's right." Iluo nodded vigorously, as if she was afraid that He Yin didn't believe her. "He picked them for me this morning. I made a garland of flowers while I was at it." He Yin's smile froze. "Today?" "That's right." Iluo smiled. "Recently, Master has been very good to me." She even forgot to say this concubine. She only cared about sharing her joy with He Yin. He promised that when the battle in the Rundu was over, he would give me a bigger house to live in. He also allowed me to plant plum blossom trees in the courtyard. Yesterday, he even saved some of his dried food for me to eat. As she spoke, Iluo's face became confused. Could it be that I've become prettier recently? Or is it because my deceased mother is protecting me from the heavens? Master is so obedient to me that I almost don't recognize him. He Yin's heart sank. That terrifying guess appeared in his mind again. He asked Iluo, "Other than this, has Lordly been acting strangely recently?" "No." Iluo shook her head. Then she complained to He Yin, "However, Xiao He Darren, how can you say that he's acting strangely when he treats me well? Master was also very good to me in the past. Now, he's just treating me better. It's probably a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now that I'm accompanying Master, Master must be moved." He Yin frowned and stepped forward. "Miss Iluo, it's best that you avoid Lordly for the next few days." "Why?" Iluo asked curiously. He Yin looked at her. The beautiful girl had grown up a lot. Her smile always carried a bit of fox-like craftiness. This made her look smart and quick-witted. She was very lovable, but her eyes still revealed her innocence. A charming beauty a weak and powerless woman. Perhaps Lordly will hurt you, Hien said in a low voice. Iluo was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed. Shao Darren, what do you mean? Master dotes on me too much. Why would he hurt me? Hien knew that she didn't believe him. In fact, women always thought that men were particularly affectionate. Little did they know that there was a prerequisite for that kind of affection. In times of peace and prosperity, a girl is naturally worthy of being doted on. Hien's voice lowered. It was so low that almost no one could hear the pain in her voice. But in times of chaos, human lives are like grass. To Lordly, a girl is more important than a city in Rundu. Iluo, I still don't understand. It's okay if you don't understand. Hien looked up at her. Lordly is very busy all day. You shouldn't be alone with him for the next few days. When you have nothing to do during the day, you can go to other places. You can go find Lord Zhao or other people. In short, if you don't have to see Lordly, then don't see Lordly. Iluo looked at her strangely. This young Muan Lang's words were simply inexplicable. Why would someone advise her to distance herself from her master? If she didn't know that Yin had led his elite troops to attack the enemy's camp a few days ago and save those captured women, Iluo would have suspected that this person was a bad person. She said, Shao Darren, I am Master's concubine. It's impossible for me to not see Master. Wait until the battle in Rundu is over. You can see her however you want. But for now, stay away from her. The young man's eyes were very clear and very dark. When he stared at someone, it was very powerful. Iluo subconsciously nodded, but then she shook her head. Ian also hesitated. She was now Muan Lang. No matter how suspicious and worried she was about Iluo, she couldn't keep someone else's concubine by her side. If she really did that, she was afraid that Li Kuang would feel that she had become the second Jiang Jiao. He might really kill Iluo. She said, Go and find Lord Zhao's wife. You can stay with her during the day. If Lord Li suddenly wants to see you, you can ask someone to tell me. I will go with you. Iluo was a little suspicious, but Hien was very insistent. In the end, she still agreed. After repeatedly reminding her, Hien went to find Wang Ba and the others. On the night of the night attack, Wang Ba and the others were injured along with her. Sure Tu and Jiang Jiao were fine. Wang Ba's leg was injured, but it wasn't too serious. Huang Xiong's wound was a little deeper. The wound on his left hand was very deep. Fortunately, it wasn't his right hand. Otherwise, he might not be able to hold a sword in the future. No matter what, they were still taking care of him. When they arrived at the house, Hong Shan and Huang Xiong were sleeping. Sure Tu and Xiao Mai had gone to help repair the weapons and shields. Only Jiang Jiao and Wang Ba were sitting by the door. When they saw Hien, the two of them raised their heads. Jiang Jiao said, Brother He, how is it? Hien shook her head. Wang Ba was furious. What's wrong with that surnamed Li? He looks tall and strong, but why is he so timid? Has he been hiding in the city like a coward? I've been starving for the past few days. If this goes on, we'll all starve to death. We'll still be hungry ghosts when we go to hell. It's better to die while killing Yudo. Jiang Jiao said, Lord Li is also afraid that the city will be destroyed and the people will be buried with him. It's just that. He looked at Hien. I've asked the soldiers here. They've run out of food. These days, we've been relying on the dry rations we brought from Liangzhou. Even this little bit of dry rations was eaten yesterday. We haven't eaten anything since yesterday. We can't go on like this. That's right. In Rundu, even the rats have been dug out and eaten. There's not even a worm to be seen. Does he want us to eat the table? What is Li Kuang thinking? If we had known earlier, we wouldn't have been able to take the excess with us the day we burned the rations. We could have just grabbed a handful and carried it with us. It would have been enough to last us half a day. Jiang Jiao was both amused and angry. At that time, how could we care so much? Brother He looked at Hien. Don't you have any other ideas? The Yudo's rations have been burned, but they're outside the city. They can still hunt and won't starve to death. Hien was deeply worried. If we're talking about who can last longer, the Rundu's people definitely won't be able to last longer than the Yudo. Therefore, Li Kuang's idea is definitely impossible. Now that he doesn't agree to go out of the city and confront the Yudo, I can't order the Runda's troops. I can only ask for external help, but, however, she was afraid that before that day came, the Rundu would be in chaos. Li Kuang's attitude these days was very wrong. She sighed and didn't say anything else. On the other side, Iluo went to find Madame Zhao. Although Yan's behavior was strange, Iluo always felt an indescribable sense of closeness towards Yan. Therefore, although she didn't believe Yan's words at all, she was still willing to do as Yan said. Now, the Li Kuang was very busy every day. He didn't have time to take care of her. She could go anywhere she wanted during the day. She had more freedom than before. Madame Zhao was holding her little grandson with a worried expression. Her daughter-in-law was seriously ill in bed. The doctor came several times, but it was useless. Everyone knew that this was an illness caused by starvation. Without food, of course, her body couldn't recover well. Madame Zhao was also hungry to the point of losing her shape. She was a good counter-magistrate's wife, but now her clothes were a lot bigger. Her exposed arms were so thin and weak that it seemed like they could be broken with a little force. Beautiful Silk thought to herself. In the past, the delicate young ladies in the city would complain about eating less every day. They looked thin and weak, which made people want to take pity on them. She was afraid that after the war, no one would think so anymore. The taste of hunger was really unbearable. A flower needed to drink enough dew before it could bloom for others to see. Madame Zhao only said a few words to Iluo before she closed her mouth. She looked listless. At this time, she was so hungry that she didn't even want to talk. Iluo sat with her for a while. Then, a soldier came over and said to Iluo, "Miss Iluo, the Lord is looking for you." "Looking for me?" Iluo was a little surprised. Li Kuang was busy with the Runda War. If she didn't take the initiative to look for Li Kuang definitely wouldn't take the initiative to look for her. However, thinking about how Li Kuang doted on her these few days, Iluo's heart was suddenly filled with joy. The only good thing about the Runda War was that Li Kuang saw her loyalty. Perhaps this doting could last for more than 3 years. It was very possible that it could last for 10 years. At this moment, she was only filled with the joy of fantasizing in her mind. Yan's advice had long been thrown to the back of her mind. She happily lifted the corner of her skirt and said with a smile, "Okay, I'll go see the Lord now." Iluo followed the soldier into the house. Li Kuang wasn't alone in the house. Li Kuang's deputy soldiers and several officials in the Runda city were also sitting in the house. There were also a few confidants of Li Kuang. Iluo felt a little strange. She originally thought that Li Kuang missed her and wanted to be affectionate with her. However, with so many people, it didn't seem like he wanted to be affectionate. Perhaps some important person was coming. She, the most beautiful girl in the Rundu, was going to fight for Li Kuang's face? But this didn't seem right. If there was an important person, why wasn't the county magistrate Zhao Shiming here? She walked forward and said, "Lord." Li Kuang's back was facing her. When he heard her voice, he turned around. These days, he was haggard and looked a lot older. When he stood next to Iluo, he really looked like Iluo's father. In the past, the famous general of Dawei, General Fei Hong, also teased her like this. However, Iluo didn't think much of it. Her own father had passed away early. Li Kuang gave her food, a house to live in, and shelter. There were many biological fathers in the world who couldn't do this for their daughters. Moreover, Li Kuang was a hero who protected the people. She admired him and never felt that there was anything bad about him. At this moment, her husband looked up at Iluo. There was a deep meaning in his eyes that she couldn't understand. It seemed to be deep pain, but it also seemed to be mixed with coldness. After looking at her for a long time, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Iluo, how long have you been following me?" Iluo tilted her head and thought for a moment, replying to Lord, "This concubine has been following you for more than 3 years. After this summer, it will be 4 years." Li Kuang doted on her very much, so he took her with him everywhere he went. His wife and son were both in Shuajing, and they still had to take care of their parents. It was impossible for them to follow him to the bitter cold of the border. However, Iluo, who looked young and beautiful, had been following him for many years without any complaints. In his life, he was straightforward and straightforward. He didn't like women who schemed against each other. Iluo had some harmless schemes, but more than that, it was a kind of pure passion. She was easily satisfied. She always had the word fight for favor written clearly on her face. She was very polite in her dealings with people. His colleagues all envied him for having such an understanding flower. In fact, Iluo had never really enjoyed anything. As his beloved concubine, Iluo's life couldn't be compared to the other women in the capital. Li Kuang muttered, "It's been 4 years." His tone was heavy. Iluo inexplicably felt a little scared. She tilted her head to look at the people around her. The soldiers who were familiar with her in the past all turned their heads to avoid her gaze. Why was this? No matter how smart she was, she couldn't understand the reason behind this. She stared at Li Kuang with her grape-like eyes full of confusion. Li Kuang's eyes flashed with pain. After a moment, he said, "Come here." Iluo obeyed and went forward. He talked with Jiang Jiao and the others for a while. Shirtu and Hong Shan also woke up. Xiaomai and Shirtu helped to repair the weapons. When they returned to the room and saw Hien, they asked, "Ehigu, aren't you going to find Lord Li today? I've already looked for him." Hien shrugged. Jiang Jiao thought for a moment. "Why don't we go with you to find Lord Li? Let's persuade him together?" Hien actually felt that Jiang Jiao's move wouldn't have much effect. Li Kuang's attitude was too firm. But since it had already come to this, he might as well give a Hail Mary a try. He got up and said, "Okay, we can try again." Back then, Lu Buong took her as his disciple because he was annoyed to death by her. Li Kuang's patience was not as good as Lu Buong's, so he might be able to do the same. However, the result of this was very likely that Li Kuang would draw his sword against her. He took the group to find Li Kuang again. On the way, they passed by Zhao Shiming's courtyard and saw Zhao Shiming's wife sitting at the door in a daze with her little grandson in her arms. Hien was stunned and went forward to ask, "Mrs. Zhao, did you see Miss Iluo?" Before she left, she had clearly told Iluo that she would ask Iluo to find Mrs. Zhao. Why did it seem that Mrs. Zhao was alone now? Mrs. Zhao didn't seem to understand Hien's words. After a while, she replied, she was called away by the commander. Hien's heart skipped a beat. Without saying anything, he immediately ran to Li Kuang's courtyard. Behind him, Wang Ba and the others didn't understand. Wang Ba asked, "Why is he so nervous? Does he have an affair with that woman?" Hong Shan said, "Don't talk nonsense. He just arrived in the Rundun not long ago. But he can still attract bees and butterflies," Wang Ba muttered. Hien ran to Li Kuang's courtyard in one breath. Today, there were soldiers guarding in front of Li Kuang's house. She was shocked and was about to rush in when she was stopped by the soldiers at the door. "What are you doing?" "The commander has ordered that no one is allowed to enter." Hien stared at his eyes. What is he doing inside? Her gaze was as cold as an ice knife. The soldiers were frightened by her. Before they could speak, Zhao Shiming also came over. Seeing this scene, he frowned and said, "Why are you quarreling again? This is Xiao He. Get out of the way." The two soldiers seemed to come back to their senses. They looked at Hien again and said firmly, "The commander has ordered that no one is allowed to enter." Muan Lang is the same. Hien said, "Get lost." She took the sword from one of the soldiers' waist. The two soldiers tried to stop her, but how could they stop her? Hien slapped the two of them to the ground. Then she kicked the door open and strode in. As soon as she entered, she was stunned. Other than Li Kuang, there were many deputies and soldiers in the room. There was also a group of women kneeling beside the chairs. These women were dressed neatly. Some of them had tear stains on their faces, while others looked calm. However, Hien still remembered one or two of their faces. They were the Dawei prisoners she rescued from Yudo during the night of the sneak attack on the enemy camp. In the middle of the room, there was a woman lying on the ground. The woman's body was covered by a white cloth. She couldn't see who she was, but she was holding a small and exquisite flower garland in her hand. Hien's eyes immediately turned red. Chapter 178. The room was silent for a moment. Then Li Kuang's angry voice sounded. "Who let you in?" Yin raised her head and glared at him, trying to suppress her trembling voice. You killed her. This is my family's business. What does it have to do with you? Li Kuang seemed to not want to see her. Get out. Some of the soldiers around couldn't bear to look at Yin. Some avoided her gaze, and some bowed their heads in silence. No one said a word. Why should I get out? Yin said coldly. Even if Iluo is your family's business, these women were saved by me from Yudo. This shouldn't be your family's business. Lordly, she suddenly raised her voice. Are you going to kill them all? When the women on the ground heard this, some of them started to sob quietly. Zhao Shiming, who rushed over after hearing the news, finally rushed in with Wang Ba and the others. When he saw the corpse in the room, he was shocked. Zhao Shiming asked with trembling hands, What's going on? What happened? Who is this person? Ian took a step forward, and Li Kuang said angrily, Don't touch her. The next moment, the white cloth was removed. The girl on the ground was bleeding from her chest, and her clothes were dyed red. She was lying on the ground with a calm expression, like a beautiful flower. A few hours ago, she was still smiling and showing Yin the garland she made, and telling others about her future. Now, she didn't cry or smile, and was just a cold corpse. Iluo? Zhao Shiming was shocked. How can Iluo be here? Did Yudo sneak in? Lordly? What's going on? If Yudo really sneaked in, how could Li Kuang be so calm, and the Rundu would be in chaos? But how could he explain the scene before him? Li Kuang stared at Yin, but Yin remained unmoved. He looked at him and said word by word, You'll have to ask the Lordly about this. I think the Lordly is trying to imitate Zhang Sun of the previous dynasty. As soon as he said this, Zhao Shiming gasped. Among Wang Ba and Shirtu's group, only Jiang Jiao had studied before. The others did not understand what Yin meant. Only Jiang Jiao's expression changed slightly. In the previous dynasty, Zhang Sun guarded Suiyang City. When the city ran out of grain, he killed his concubines to feed the soldiers. What is the Lordly doing? You want to be to Wei Zhang Sun, but there are other ways to make a living in Rundu. Why do you have to do this? What do you know? Li Kuang couldn't help but scold her. You're just a woman. If I can save the people of the city, I won't regret even if I die. She's just a woman. Dying for Rundu is not a pity at all. Ian looked at him. Li Kuang had fought the enemy side by side with her, and they had gone through life and death together. Although she and Li Kuang were not close friends, they could be considered old friends. Ian had never doubted Li Kuang's character. As a military leader, he was upright, brave, and loyal. However, in the eyes of the world, he was a hero. In his eyes, women were just like cats and dogs. They were animals. They were nothing more than sacrificial lambs. His favorite concubine could be killed in the blink of an eye for the sake of righteousness and become food to fill his stomach. This was even more terrifying than swapping children for food. She had thought that this might happen, but that was the matter of the previous dynasty. Now it had not reached such a desperate situation, and Li Kuang was not Zhang Sun. Yin still had hope. She thought that perhaps she had thought too much of human nature. But nothing could stop it. Li Kuang still made the same choice. When he was reading the biography of Zhong Yi in the Xianchang Wan, Zhang Sun lost Suiyang. The enemy could not break the city, so they camped outside the city and waited for the soldiers and horses in the city to starve to death. There was no food in the city. Zhang Sun killed his beloved concubine and forced the soldiers to eat her. Then someone killed the servants to make food for the army. The women in the city died, and the men took over. The number of people eaten was 20 to 30,000. None of the young people in the hall made a sound. The atmosphere was quiet. The teacher was still reading. Before the war, there were 40,000 people in Suiyang. When the city was broken, only 400 people survived. They were all young people in their teens, and they all came from rich and high-ranking officials. They had never heard of such a tragic thing. Cannibalism was already shocking enough. If a war was added, it would be even more shocking. The teacher asked, Do you think what Zhang Sun did was right or wrong? The young people spoke enthusiastically, and each made their own statements. In the end, they still thought that Zhang Sun's actions at that time were understandable. The teacher said, killing people is against human nature. But it was not Zhang Sun's original intention. There is a saying, the crime of Tsang Huang is light, but the merit of revival is heavy. The cannibalism is too small, but the merit of defending the city is too great. The young people nodded in agreement. They all thought that although it was tragic, it was precisely this incident that reflected Zhang Sun's loyalty. After all, the concubine was a family matter, but defending the city was a national matter. Zhang Sun was a loyal minister who sacrificed his concubine to defend the country. He did not think so at that time. She sat in the hall and did not speak. She also did not agree with the young people's opinions. She only frowned and looked solemn. The teacher saw that she did not agree and called her up with a smile. He asked, Hirufei, do you have a different opinion? At that time, she was still an idiot who was at the bottom of the exam in Xianchang Dojo. When her name was called, she felt a little uneasy. However, the anger in her heart could not be appeased. She finally gathered her courage and said, everyone says that Zhang Sun is a loyal minister and a righteous man. It is indeed true. But aren't those people who were eaten innocent? I can understand his choice, but if it were me, I would definitely not do that. Oh, what do you think? The teacher asked with a smile. I will lead the remaining soldiers and fight to the death with the rebel army outside the city. The young girl stood in the hall. The sunlight shone through the window and fell on her face. Her delicate and slightly childish face was covered with a layer of determination. The person who holds the sword in his hand should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it is the enemy in front of him or the weak behind him. I will never draw my sword against the weak. The hall was silent for a moment. Then, the laughter of the young people rang out. Weak? What weak? He himself is a weak person. Also, Brother He's swordsmanship is so bad. How can he hold a sword? I'm afraid you're not dreaming. What you said is so powerful. How is that possible? If such a bad knife and horse can be sent to defend the city, I think there is no need to defend the city. Ha ha! Hien was surrounded by laughter, and her face flushed red. She pursed her lips and thought, 30 years in the East, 30 years in the West, maybe one day, she would be a general galloping on the battlefield. At that time, she would definitely protect the people she wanted to protect. She would never let the unarmed, common people become food for the army. If she wanted to do something, she would be the bravest general. The teacher calmed down the young people who were laughing at her. He looked at Hien with gratification in his eyes. You can think from the perspective of the common people. It shows that you have a heart of compassion for the weak. This is very good. Hien sighed in her heart. It was not that she had a heart of compassion for the weak. It was because the young people who were laughing in the hall were all men. Naturally, they thought of her as Zhang Sun, and she was a woman. Naturally, she stood in the position of beloved concubine. From a standpoint of Zhang Sun, this action was very righteous. From the standpoint of beloved concubine, this was just an undeserved disaster. The joys and sorrows of people in the world could not be interconnected at all times. It was nothing more than a choice made based on one's position. Just like this moment. Hien said, you are a loyal subject. What crime have you committed? You don't need to say so much to me, Li Kuang said coldly. Iluo is my concubine. She is my person. How I deal with my people is my business. As for these women, ask them if they were willing. I did not force them. Hien looked at the women sitting on the floor. One of the women's eyes were red. She kowtowed to Hien and said softly, thank you, Darren, for planning for us. It's just that we have already been defiled by the Yudo. Our bodies are no longer clean. Since we cannot go home, we also do not have the face to live in this world. Now that we can use our bodies to fight for a chance to live for the Rundu, it is our good fortune. Perhaps this merit can help us wash away the mud on our bodies and accumulate good fortune in the future. What merit? Before she could say anything, Hien interrupted her. Wang Ba and the others looked at Hien in surprise. All along, Hien's temperament was very gentle. Even when Wang Ba provoked her in the past, She did not say a single word of profanity. Now that she was cursing, it was obvious that she was very angry. What do you mean by our bodies are no longer clean? What do you mean by no face to live in this world? Hien said angrily. Is this your fault? She looked at Li Kuang and the soldiers in the room with their heads bowed. Is this their fault? If you think that this is doing merit, then you are gravely mistaken. Lord Li, she turned to look at Li Kuang. You are the city's chief soldier. Let me tell you, these women were captured by the Yudo because the Yudo are cruel and because you are not capable. What wrong did they do? I have never seen an injured person in the wrong, and the person who harmed them is relieved. You are doing exactly what the Yudo want. In their eyes, the people of Dowei are all fools. They only care about doing evil. So naturally, there will be innocent people to bear the blame for them. How can there be such a ridiculous thing in this world? If being touched by the Yudo means that they're not clean, then from the moment they stepped into Dowei's land, there is no need to fight against them. Dowei's land is also not clean. Just give it to them. What's the point of fighting? You. Be careful with your words. Li Kuang suppressed his anger. I won't. Hien stared at him. There seemed to be a ball of fire in her eyes that wanted to burn everything around her. You are a man. You are their general. You pointed your knife at your women and your people. What is this? If you follow me today to kill a few Yudo and eat Yudo's meat and drink their blood, I will respect you as men. But there is no such thing in this world. Men can't win a battle, so they ask innocent and weak women to sacrifice themselves. This is called cowardice. I said before, they are willing. Are they really willing? Hien's gaze was sharp. Okay, let me ask you. She looked at the women. Why do you think you can't live? Is it because of what others say? If others say something, you will refute them. If you're not good with words, you will use your fists. Is this your fault? If they still use this to humiliate you, then they're the most despicable and shameless people. There is no need to show them any mercy. I saved your lives. If you give them up so easily, where do you put me? Her expression was frightening. The women did not dare to speak. After a while, one of the young women burst into tears. She sobbed, I don't want to die. I'm scared. Li Kuang's face was ashen. If you don't want to die, I am here. No one can force you to die. How dare you say this? Li Kuang said, This is not the Liangzhou guard. Hien's expression calmed. She stepped forward and shielded the women behind her. Lord Li, Iluo is your concubine. She has been with you for many years. She is not an item that can be casually given away. She is yours, but before that, she is a person. Today, you cannot touch these women. If you want to, Hien slowly pulled out the long sword she had taken from the soldiers at the door. You have to go through my sword first. You think I don't dare? Li Kuang was furious. He pulled out the long sword at his waist. When the surrounding soldiers saw this, they all pulled out their swords and pointed them at Hien. The room was filled with a tense atmosphere. Zhao Shiming said anxiously, What's wrong with you? Why are our own people fighting with our own people? Our top priority is to defeat those Yudo. Lord Li, I think Xiao Darren is right. You can't eat people. If you do this, the people outside will follow suit. What will happen to run to city then? Even if we manage to defend the city, do you want the people of the world to point at our backs and curse us? He also had his own selfish motives. Iluo was Li Kuang's most beloved concubine. Zhao Shiming had to admit that Iluo was beautiful and intelligent. She was very lovable. If it was him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it. However, Li Kuang could kill her without any hesitation. These martial artists sigh. In the end, as officials, wouldn't they all have to set an example? At his age, he hadn't even killed a chicken in his life. If he had to send his family to their deaths, Zhao Shiming would rather die himself. Thus, he immediately stood on Hien's side. Li Kuang didn't care about Zhao Shiming. He didn't care about a county magistrate who didn't even know how to wield a sword. What made him angry was Hien. No one would have thought that Hien would barge in so rashly and criticize him without any explanation. Iluo had been with him for many years. Didn't his heart ache? Didn't he hesitate when he killed her? However, the battle had already reached this point. If the Rundu couldn't be defended, everyone would die. Killing Iluo in front of these deputy generals also made them understand their determination to defend the Rundu. Among these deputy generals, they had met Iluo many times. They couldn't bear to see a living girl killed in front of them. There were also people who pleaded for Iluo. However, Li Kuang thought that he would do what Zhang Sun did in the past. It didn't matter even if he had to bear the curse of the world. His merits and demerits would be judged by future generations. However, this Muan Lang, Hien, barged in and stood in front of him to protect those women. His gaze was so bright that it made him feel ashamed. He suddenly thought of Ru Fei. General Fei Hong, who was still a deputy general, would try his best to save the women who were captured by the enemy in every battle. In fact, when these women returned home, what awaited them was not good. However, Ru Fei would always patiently comfort them and encourage them. Li Kuang had never seen a man who was so considerate. However, he thought that General Fei Hong was the only one in the world who was so naive. However, another one appeared in front of him today. Li Kuang's expression was cold. Muan Lang, are you going to fight with me? I'm sorry, but I can't let them die here. A woman on the side cried and looked at Hien. Sir, don't waste your energy on us. If our lives can be exchanged for the safety of the Rundu, we are willing. The safety of the Rundu cannot be exchanged for Baiyu. Hien said coldly. Sacrificing women for safety is no different from begging for mercy from the enemy. Lord Li, this is not the previous dynasty, and you are not Zhang Sun. Li Kuang was almost angry. He knew that every word of the young man in front of him was correct, but he had no other choice. You want to fight with me? He said coldly. What the hell is this? Wang Ba spat on the ground. You think it's reasonable to kill a woman? We bandits don't kill women, the elderly, or children. As the saying goes, even bandits have morals. You soldiers who live off the imperial grain are worse than animals. Don't waste time. We the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th of the Liang Province Guards accept your challenge. He spoke as if he was fighting in a martial arts arena. Li Kuang was so angry that his expression became even uglier. At this time, another person walked in. It was Chu Zhao. He looked at Li Kuang and bowed. Then, he smiled and said, Lord Li, this is not appropriate. His Majesty has always promoted benevolent governance. If word of cannibalism reaches His Majesty's ears, I'm afraid His Majesty will not be happy. He was going to stand on Hiyan's side. Chu Zhao represented Prime Minister Su. One was a Liang province guard, and the other was Prime Minister Su. The pressure was unimaginable. Li Kuang was angry and annoyed. Who was this Hiyan? Why were they following him like this? However, the soldiers around him were all looking at him. He gritted his teeth and said, You are not my opponent. Hiyan smiled and held his sword horizontally in front of him. Lord Li, why don't you try? The tip of the sword was cold, and the air was cold. The gunpowder in the room was about to explode. At this time, a soldier's voice suddenly came from outside. Sir, sir. Li Kuang was filled with anger. He couldn't go up or down. Hearing this, he said angrily, What are you shouting for? In the next moment, the door to the room was opened again. Someone walked in with a calm voice. Lord Li, before you teach the Liang Province Guard a lesson, you should ask me first. This voice. Hiyan was startled. He quickly turned his head. He saw a young man dressed in dark clothes with narrow sleeves and dark armor walk forward and stand in front of him. They hadn't seen each other for a month, but the last time they met felt like 10,000 years. His appearance was handsome, and his figure was like a spring willow. His expression was as cold as ever. Military Governor Xiao. Li Kuang couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He didn't expect to see Xiao Ju, the commander-in-chief of the Right Army here. Xiao Ju didn't look at Hiyan or Li Kuang. His gaze swept past the crying women. He said calmly, The person holding the sword should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it is pointed at the enemy in front of him or the weak behind him. You shouldn't point your sword at the weak. Hiyan suddenly looked up. Chapter 179. His eyes were cold and his voice was calm, but in that instant, Hiyan was brought back to that afternoon in the Xianchang dojo. His voice overlapped with the young boy's voice, making it impossible to tell who it was. From outside came a soldier's shout. He was excited and joyful. "Sir, Lord, reinforcements are here. Reinforcements are here." Reinforcements? Yin looked at Xiao Ju's back. He brought the Nanfu army? How is this possible? Just as he heard this, Li Kuang pushed aside the people in front of him and rushed out of the room. Yin looked at Xiao Ju and also rushed out. Outside the city, there were shouts of killing. Yin climbed up the city tower and looked down with Li Kuang. On the plains, Yudo and Dewei's troops were fighting. The word Yin was written on the war flag. There was a young man sitting on the horse in the lead. His hair was tied up high, and he had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. He wore silver armor and held a halberd in his hand. He looked particularly high-spirited as he led his men to fight. "Yin-he." Yin smiled. Li Kuang, who had rushed over, saw this scene and was also excited. He immediately ordered the troops in the city. "Follow me out to fight Yudo." Li Kuang did not expect the reinforcements to arrive, and neither did Wyatt. The day before they decided to attack the city, they were caught off guard by the troops brought by Lieutenant General Yin He. Li Kuang led the Rundu troops to join the battle, and the Utho troops were forced to retreat. Their leader, Huyate, abandoned his troops and fled. The rest of the Utho soldiers were scattered like scattered sand. A portion of them were captured by Li Kuang, while the rest retreated south of Rundu with Huyate. "Don't chase a cornered enemy." And he stopped Li Kuang from chasing after them. He wiped off the Wudong blood on his armor and casually tossed his handkerchief to a servant beside him. He mocked, "With just these few Wutong soldiers, you don't even dare to come out of the city? Too cowardly." These words were not pleasant to hear, and it was said by a kid who was much younger than him. Li Kuang was not angry. If Yin He had not brought reinforcements, the Yudo would not have retreated so quickly. He was truly grateful to Yin He. This was out of his expectations. Who knew that General Fei Hong, who had been waiting bitterly, did not come, but Lieutenant General Guade came. "I thank Generals Yin on behalf of the people of the city. The Rundu will never forget your help." However, he hesitated. Why did Generals Yin come to the Rundu? He had never written a letter to Yin He. Yin He snorted and laughed. He carried the Fangtian halberd on his back and walked forward casually. "Let's talk inside." The soldiers cleaned up the battlefield outside until late at night. Everyone clapped their hands in celebration of this great victory. Not only that, Yin He had not only brought reinforcements, he had also brought food. The soldiers set up a large pot in the city and used the food they brought to cook porridge. The people of the Rundu who were still alive carried bowls of porridge with gratitude. The fragrance of the rice floated in the air of the Rundu city and did not dissipate for a long time. Inside the house, Zhao Shiming was rubbing his hands nervously as he looked at the two people sitting on the table. One was the Right Army Commander Xiao Huaijin. The other was Guide Lieutenant General Yin He. He was just a county magistrate of the Rundu. How could he meet such important people in his life? He could be considered lucky. However, one of them was cold, while the other was arrogant. Both of them did not seem easy to get close to. Zhao Shiming did not know what to say other than thanking them repeatedly for saving the people of the Rundu. At this moment, Zhao Shiming sighed in his heart. If only Luo was still here. It would be much better to interact with a smart beauty than these old men. In the past, Iluo would always be the one to smooth things over. Li Kuang probably thought of this as well. His expression was a little stiff. Yin He, the Lieutenant General of Goeita, was only in his early 20s. He was very young and could be considered handsome. However, his gaze always carried a hint of provocation. His chin was also slightly raised, as though he did not like to place people in his eyes. His hair was tied up very high, and his ponytail fell behind his head, showing the arrogance of a young man. In comparison, the Right Army Commander Xiao Ju, who was sitting beside him, was as calm as autumn water. After taking off his armor, he looked more like a noble young master sitting in a winery in the capital. He was not as arrogant as Yin He, but his calm and indifferent expression was also emitting an aura that kept people 1,000 miles away. Zhao Shiming wiped his sweat. What should he say? He couldn't afford to offend these two great gods. Before he could think of what to say, Li Kuang spoke first. Li Kuang hesitated for a moment and asked Generals Yin, why did you suddenly come to help the Rundu? Yin laughed softly and sat up straight. He said, I haven't asked you yet. Is there a person called He Yin in the Rundu? When he said this, everyone in the room had different expressions. Xiao Ju's gaze moved slightly, but he did not say anything. Seems like there is. Yin he said, Lord Li, call that person over. I want to meet him. He Yin was waiting outside the room. Sure enough, not long after, someone came out and said, Lord Xiao, Generals Yin invites you in. Wang Bao was stunned. What's going on? He's asking you to go in alone. Is he going to punish me later? Why don't we go with you? Jiang Jiao was also slightly hesitant. You left the Liangzhou guards this time. If military governor Xiao issues a military order to punish you, it's not because of that. He Yin looked at the door and shook his head. Don't worry, nothing will happen. She patted Jiang Jiao's shoulder and turned around to walk into Li Kuang's room alone. Everyone in the room followed He Yin in, and their gazes landed on her. The young man in silver armor looked at He Yin and sized up He Yin. He said, You are He Yin? Yes. He Yin stood up from his chair and looked down at He Yin. He was a head taller than He Yin. He used his hand to measure the height of He Yin's head. He clicked his tongue and asked Xiao Ju seriously, There are still people this short in the military camp? He Yin was speechless. He retracted his hand and rubbed his chin as he sized up He Yin. You're not tall, but you're quite brave. You're the one who wrote the letter asking for help and asked me to come to the Rundu. As soon as he said this, Li Kuang looked at He Yin. Xiao Ju's gaze also landed on He Yin. He Yin calmly accepted everyone's different expressions. Yes. Then you have good taste, Yin he said disapprovingly. You didn't ask Ru Fei, that useless person in front of you. Instead, you asked me to come and help the Rundu. It seems like you know very well that I am more reliable than Ru Fei. He Yin didn't say anything. How could he say anything? If he followed his words, he would also step on himself and deny what he said. He Yin was actually quite happy to hear people scold Ru Fei like this. That day, she and Li Kuang parted on bad terms. After she noticed that the Rundu situation was not good, she borrowed a few people from Zhao Shiming and went to ask for help from Yin He in Ling County. She still remembered that Yin He led the troops to guard Ling County. It was not as close as Hua Yuan. In fact, Yin He's reputation was not as good as Ru Fei's. If a normal person asked for help, the first person they would think of would be Ru Fei, and not Yin He. However, Yin knew that Ru Fei would not come at all. That was why she took a step back and asked for the next best thing. It was not easy to mobilize the troops in Jinling. In comparison, Yin had a lot more freedom. However, Yin might not come at all. Therefore, in a letter, other than writing about the critical situation in the Rundu, she also wrote about Ru Fei's despicable actions of not helping when he saw someone in need. The words you scolded Ru Fei in the letter made me feel very comfortable. He Yin looked at He Yin. You really know how I feel. He Yin thought, how could she not know? As her classmate, this person in front of her bullied her a lot during those years in the Xianchang dojo. It was Yin He and a few other youths who would cause trouble for her every now and then. They would either tease her or bully her. Seeing this person, she could almost see the dark days in the Xianchang dojo. And he hated her. He started to hate her when they were classmates in the Xianchang dojo. After so many years, he still stubbornly hated her. In order to please him, He Yin wrote a lot of bad things about Ru Fei in the letter. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Looking at it now, it was true. Because He Yin insulted Ru Fei, Yin He naturally turned He Yin into his own camp. Even though you are short and thin, I think you are very smart. In the next moment, Yin He placed his hand on his shoulder. How about you follow me in the future? Yin Nongguang. Xiao Ju's gaze landed on his hand and reminded, she is a member of the Liang Province Guards. Liang Province Guards? He Yin retracted his hand and looked at He Yin. He asked in confusion, aren't you from the Rundu? Generals Yin, He Yin said, I was in the Liang Province Guards recruit camp before. Later, Her Majesty personally conferred the title of Mu and Lang. I heard that the Rundu was in trouble and specially came to help the city. She emphasized the words Mu and Lang. Even though Xiao Ju classified her as a member of the Liang Province Guards, if she didn't want to implicate him, it was best to draw a clear line. You were a member of the Liang Province Guards and came to the Rundu yourself? And he glanced at Xiao Ju and then looked at Hien. The relationship between them was too complicated and he couldn't understand it. He simply returned to his seat and leaned against the chair. He snorted and said, "Forget it. I don't want to know about your complicated internal affairs." However, what is it again? Hien was already used to this fellow's arrogance and reminded him, Hien, I didn't come because of your letter asking for help. Even if I came, it wouldn't be so fast. Zhao Shiming asked cautiously, "Then may I ask why Generals Yin?" He laughed and looked at Xiao Ju provocatively. "The commander-in-chief of the Right Army personally asked me for help. This is the first time in his life that he has asked me for help. I am so generous, so of course I have to come and help. Isn't that right, Military Governor Xiao?" Xiao Ju's expression was indifferent, and she didn't pay attention to his words. Hien was astonished. He meant. Xiao Ju also asked He for help. That's right, he didn't bring the southern prefecture soldiers here. After all, Liang Province wasn't as close as Ling County. She actually thought of the same thing as Xiao Ju. In that case, even if she didn't write the letter asking for help, he would still come. Rundu City shouldn't be destroyed. Lord Li, County Magistrate Zhao. He played with his hair. Although this time it was Hien and Military Governor Xiao who asked me for help. The one who led the troops here was me. You know very well where the credit goes this time. The victory of the Rundu City this time was all thanks to Generals Yin. Zhao Shiming quickly said. As soon as he spoke, he realized that there was another person in the room. He immediately looked at Xiao Ju. Seeing that the young man's expression was calm and there wasn't a trace of displeasure, he was relieved. Fortunately, this one person didn't care about the credit. If both of them came to snatch the credit, his small temple in Rundu City wouldn't be able to accommodate two big Buddhas fighting. Hien had long heard about He's love for credit. However, this time the Rundu City was defended because of He's help. It was understandable that he wanted the credit. He stretched lazily and yawned. I've been rushing for days, and I've been playing Yudo the moment I arrived. I haven't had a chance to rest properly. I need a rest. I'll have to trouble everyone to prepare hot water for me. There's no need for food. I heard that the people here are so hungry that they're about to eat people. I don't have the hobby of eating people. Zhao Shiming repeatedly said yes, and quickly ordered the servants to prepare the food for He. He stood up and was about to walk out. When he passed by Xiao Ju, he stopped and looked at Xiao Ju. He said in a conceited tone, "Whether you admit it or not, Xiao Huijin, this time, I've won against you." After saying this, he seemed to be in a good mood. He placed his hands behind his head and swaggered out. He stared at his back. He was puzzled. To be honest, he didn't like Xiao Ju back then and always went against Xiao Ju. It was all because Xiao Ju was better than him in both civil and military matters. After being in second place for a long time, he wanted to have a taste of being in first place. However, that first place just wouldn't drop no matter what. It was indeed annoying. However, even she, who was in last place, would always find fault with him. He didn't understand. How'd she get in his way? The person who was fighting with her for last place was Lin Shuanghe, not He. Why was He so resentful towards her? This resentment had persisted for so many years. However, He's temperament was exactly the same as back then. He was competitive, obstinate, and self-opinionated. All his emotions were written on his face. As she was thinking about this, Xiao Ju stood up and walked out. When she passed by her, she said coldly, "Come here." Hien, she sighed in her heart. She knew that this day would come sooner or later, but she didn't expect it to come so early. After all, who would have thought that Xiao Ju would follow He to the Rundu? Jiang Jiao and the others waited patiently outside until Hien came out. When they saw her walking out with Xiao Ju, they all looked serious. From the looks of it, they were going to settle scores in private. Hong Shan gestured to her to ask if they needed to go and plead for leniency. Ian shook her head slightly. This wasn't something that could be brushed off with one or two pleas. The room darkened. Only the light from the oil lamp on the table shone on the wall, casting shadows on the walls. The room that Zhao Shiming arranged for Xiao Ju could be considered luxurious. Ian followed him in and buried her head. She was thinking about how to smooth things over when the person in front of her suddenly stopped and turned around. She bumped into Xiao Ju's chest. Ian took 2 steps back and stood still. She raised her head and saw the person in front of her looking down at her. Although he didn't say anything, it was a little scary. The air was so quiet that it felt cold, even in the summer. Ian paused and coughed softly. Commander-in-Chief. He looked at the sword in He-Yan's hand. It was the sword that she snatched from Li Kuang's guards when she was trying to save the women who were captured. She forgot to return it to Li Kuang. He-Yan's heart tightened. She put the sword on the table and explained, "This is someone else's sword." Xiao Ju took a step forward. He-Yan held his breath. He thought that she was going to denounce him. The next moment, his arm was grabbed and turned over. There was a knife wound on his palm. It wasn't deep. He had been holding it. The bleeding had stopped, but it looked a little scary. He-Yan probably hurt his hand when he was fighting with Li Kuang's guards. The situation was critical, and he didn't pay attention to it. If it wasn't for Xiao Ju's actions, he wouldn't have noticed it. He didn't say anything. He turned and walked to the side. He-Yan didn't know what to do. He heard him say, "Come here." The handkerchief was soaked in hot water. When it covered his palm, it stung a little. It was more of an itch. It was as if a colorful butterfly had landed on his palm and slowly crawled over it, leaving behind a numbing shadow. He lowered his head and sprinkled the powder on He-Yan's wound. His expression was focused and quiet. He-Yan stared at him. The young man's eyelashes were thick and long. Under the light, his side profile was as handsome as a painting. He was silent, gentle, and calm. There was no condemnation or sarcasm as expected. He-Yan inexplicably felt a sense of guilt. It was as if he had done something unforgivable and had wronged Xiao Ju. She mumbled, "Commander-in-Chief, actually I didn't follow 4th young Master Chu to the Rundu. It was a coincidence that Chu Zhao was here." However, in Xiao Ju's eyes, she might have misunderstood. Although she was determined to stay away from Xiao Ju to avoid bringing trouble to him, she didn't want him to misunderstand and think that she was on Chu Zhao's side. "I know." His voice was cold and emotionless. He-Yan didn't know what to say for a moment. He-Yan's movements were very gentle, even gentler than when he was applying the medicine on himself. Because he was very tall, he had to bend over slightly when applying the medicine. He-Yan originally followed his gaze and looked at Xiao Ju's palm. As she looked, her gaze fell on Xiao Ju's face. No matter how many good words were used to describe him, she felt that something was missing. Just as she was lost in thought, Xiao Ju suddenly raised his head and met her gaze without warning. His dark eyes were glittering and clear as autumn water. She was caught red-handed and her ears turned red. However, she still had to maintain a calm expression. She pointed at her palm and said, "It's done." The wound didn't look as scary as before after the powder was sprinkled on it. He-Yan retracted his hand and felt a little uneasy. This didn't seem to be Xiao Ju's style. If Xiao Ju was a normal person, she would have come over and asked him questions. However, she was so quiet today that He-Yan didn't know where to start. Why did she change her personality? He-Yan didn't understand. However, if Xiao Ju didn't ask, she didn't know what to say either. After he finished applying the medicine for He-Yan, he sat down on a chair in the room. He didn't let He-Yan leave, nor did he have any intention of asking her questions. After a while, He-Yan couldn't help but ask, "Commander-in-Chief, why didn't you ask me why I left the Liangzhou guards and came to the Rundu without permission? You are the Muan Lang personally appointed by Her Majesty. You have the official seal and the official uniform. You can decide whether you want to stay or leave. You don't have to discuss it with me," Xiao Ju said calmly. "It's up to you whether you want to stay or leave." This was originally an excuse that He-Yan had prepared for herself. She didn't expect that Xiao Ju would be one step ahead of her. This made He-Yan unable to continue her words. "I forced Wang Ba and the others to come here. Please don't punish them. I will take responsibility for this matter. I don't have any bad intentions. I was just worried that the Rundu would fall, so I overestimated myself and came to help. Forget it. Since Xiao Ju didn't want to speak, she would take responsibility for herself first. Her attitude was better when she admitted her mistake. Why do you think, Xiao Ju said, he Rufei won't help the Rundu? In the end, he would still ask this question. He sighed in his heart and looked at him. If I say that he Rufei is not a good person, will you believe me? Xiao Ju looked at her indifferently and raised the corner of her mouth. Evidence. I can't produce any evidence, and I can't convince you. However, in my opinion, he Rufei isn't the hero that people say he is. She said, he Rufei, instead of General Fei Hong, Commander-in-Chief. He looked at him and slowly said, if one day he Rufei and I have different standpoints and draw our swords against each other, which side will you stand on? She had wanted to ask this question for a long time. He Rufei, and she would eventually have such a day. The He Rufei that Xiao Ju knew was the He Rufei of the Xianchang Gymnasium, and the He Yin that Xiao Ju knew was the current He Yin. Both of them were actually her, but how would Xiao Ju choose? He Yin wasn't very sure. It seemed that every one of her had a good relationship with Xiao Ju, but they weren't close friends. He Yin didn't know what she was like in Xiao Ju's heart and what she meant to him, whether it was in the past or now. Xiao Ju looked at her quietly. After a while, he said, it's very late today. You should go out. He didn't answer He Yin. He Yin didn't know if she was disappointed or glad. She was disappointed that Xiao Ju didn't answer her directly, but she was glad that Xiao Ju didn't deny her. She nodded. Yes. He Yin retreated, and the room once again quieted down. The young man's gaze fell on the wound medicine on the table. He lowered his beautiful eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a while, someone walked in. It was Fei Nu. He walked to Xiao Ju and whispered, young master, Wan Ying's news came back. He Sui's problem hasn't been found yet. She's fine. Xiao Ju interrupted him. Fei Nu was stunned. Ian had many suspicious points. From the beginning until now, she didn't tell anyone. She brought a few new Liangzhou guards to the Rundu. No matter what, no one could give a reasonable explanation. She left with Chu Zhao one after the other. Now, she saw Chu Zhao again in the Rundu. Qi Wu and Fei Nu couldn't help but suspect that Yin might be Chu Zhao's man. But they also felt that if she was Chu Zhao's man, her behavior was too arrogant and undisguised. The young man stood up. His shadow was long under the light. He looked at the light at the corner of the table thoughtfully. After a while, he said, tell Wan Ying that she doesn't need to investigate He Yin. Investigate He Rufei. Chapter 180. The Rundu city gradually regained its vitality. Yin He's troops not only chased away the Yudo, but they also brought back food. The food sent from Hua Yuan solved the Rundu's urgent needs. General Fei Hong is not in Hua Yuan. Li Kuang looked at Yin He in confusion. He already returned to Shuo Jing? How is that possible? Are you suspecting that I'm lying? Yin He frowned. No, Li Kuang said, it's just that when the Rundu was surrounded by the Yudo, I immediately asked for General He's help. There are 3 groups of people, so it's impossible for there to be no news at all. I originally thought that he didn't come because the situation in Hua Yuan wasn't good, but why did he return to Shuo Jing? You'll have to ask him. And he put his hands behind his head and leaned back in his chair. I'm not familiar with He Rufei. Li Kuang didn't say anything. While the two were silent, someone came in. It was Zhao Shiming. Zhao Shiming first looked at Yin He, then carefully said to Li Kuang, Commander, that Iluo is being buried today. When Li Kuang heard this, his expression became ugly. After a while, he stood up and said, let's go. Iluo wasn't actually from the Rundu, but her parents passed away early, so she didn't have any other relatives. It was summer, so they couldn't bring Iluo's body back to Shuo Jing, so they could only bury her here. She was buried in a deep forest in the Rundu city. The scenery was beautiful, and there was a large grape forest not far away. Iluo loved to eat grapes when she was alive, so she would probably be happy to be buried here. When they arrived, They didn't expect that Xiao Ju and He Yin would also be there. Beside the two of them, there was a young man in white holding a folding fan. Xiao Ju didn't mind, but when Li Kuang saw He Yin, he felt uncomfortable. That day, he and He Yin had almost drawn their swords in the hall. In the end, it was true that everything came to an abrupt end because of Xiao Ju's appearance. However, after the dust had settled, in the dead of the night, He Yin's words always lingered in his ears, smashing him until he couldn't sleep at night. On the bed next to him, when he turned his head, he could see Yi Luo's smiling face. However, when he opened his eyes, he couldn't grasp anything. He had not been able to become Zhang Sun, but he had also lost beautiful silk forever. This Yin He Yin He Yin, Yin Yin He Yin, Yin He Yin He Yin Yin, Yin He Yin He Yin, Yin He Yin Yin Yin, Yin He Yin, Yin Yin He Yin Yin Yin, Yin Yin He Yin. He Yin didn't look at Li Kuang. In fact, Shi Yin didn't want to look at Li Kuang. She and Li Kuang had fought side by side. She knew that Li Kuang was loyal and righteous. However, because she was a woman, she always stood on Yi Luo's side. Therefore, she felt that the woman was innocent. The coffin was placed in the ground. Everything was settled. He looked at the small stone tablet. What was ridiculous was that Yi Luo died at the hands of Li Kuang. However, the name on the tablet was that she was Li Kuang's wife. He lowered her eyes and walked forward. She placed the small garland with purple flowers in her hand in front of the stone tablet. This girl once said to her that she hoped that she would still be Li Kuang's favorite concubine 10 years later. Life was unpredictable. Before 10 years had passed, she would no longer exist in this world. In a way, her wish seemed to have come true. Not only 10 years, Li Kuang wouldn't be able to forget Yi Luo for the rest of his life. Shi Yin didn't know if she was sad or sarcastic. However, she was already buried. It was useless to say anything. The crowd gradually dispersed. Perhaps Li Kuang couldn't face He Yin's gaze. He didn't even say goodbye to He Yin and left in a hurry. He Yin and the other two walked behind him. Lin Shuanghe stole a glance at He Yin and whispered, "Sister He, don't be sad." He Yin was a woman. Women were soft-hearted. Lin Shuanghe also knew that He Yin couldn't bear to see the world treat women unfairly. Li Kuang wanted to protect the city. However, this heavy burden was shouldered by his concubine alone. She even paid the price with her life. In his opinion, it was too heartless. These days, he was busy treating the wounded soldiers with the Rundu's medical officer. He didn't have time to catch up with He Yin. Today was the first time he saw He Yin since he came to the Rundu. At first glance, he felt that He Yin had lost a lot of weight. She was originally thin and weak. Now, she looked so weak that she could be blown away by the wind. It seemed that there was no food in the city. She was starving to this extent. He Yin shook her head. "I just feel a little helpless." After all, in the world, there were many people who thought like Li Kuang. There were only a few people who thought like her, let alone the injustice of the world. She couldn't even save a single Yi Luo. Her personal ability was really insignificant. It was harder than ascending to heaven to change the world opinion. However, He Yin smiled. "I didn't expect that when the commander-in-chief came in that day, he would stand on my side." She looked at Xiao Ju. "I still remember what the commander-in-chief said." Xiao Ju said, "I didn't say it." He Yin was stunned. Of course, she knew that it wasn't Xiao Ju who said that. That was what she answered her teacher when she was in the Xianchang Hall. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to still remember it. She also didn't expect that Xiao Ju would say it under the circumstances at that time. Then, who said it? She asked tentatively. Xiao Ju looked ahead and didn't say anything. What appeared in her mind was a spring afternoon in the Xianchang Hall of Shuo many years ago. At that time, he was still young. He followed his classmates to study in the school. The spring sun was very warm. It was so hot that it made people have beautiful dreams. He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He casually listened to his teacher's lecture. The hero of the previous dynasty killed his concubine to reward the three armies and won a good reputation for righteousness. The youth scrambled to speak. Everyone felt that they were the hero. He didn't participate. The world was like a game of chess. People were like ants. At that time, Whether it was the hero or the beloved concubine, they were just insignificant drops of water in the torrent of history. Whether they could cause a splash or not, it wasn't important. In the end, it would all pass. He was halfway through his beautiful dream when he heard his teacher say, "Hirufei, do you have a different opinion?" Hirufei? Xiao Ju remembered that young Master He. Among the many talents in the Xianchang Hall, he was particularly clumsy and conspicuous. However, he was also extremely hardworking. If he was like Lin Shuanghe, it would have been good. However, he had the lofty ambition of defying the heavens and changing his fate, written all over his body. This kind of person, in the secular world, will be considered laughable. However, this kind of youth's pure enthusiasm wasn't annoying. Since he was called out by his teacher, he probably had to give a vague answer. Xiao Ju didn't open his eyes. He calmly listened. Everyone says that Zhang Sun is a loyal and righteous person. That's not false. However, aren't those people who were eaten innocent? I can understand his choice. However, if it were me, I definitely wouldn't do that. The youth who had closed his eyes and pretended to sleep slightly trembled. His long eyelashes were like the wings of a butterfly resting on a flower, startled by the occasional breeze. "Oh, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to take the remaining soldiers and fight to the death with the rebel army outside the city. The person holding the sword should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it's at the enemy in front of me or the weak behind me." Such childish, naive, and righteous words. A trace of ridicule appeared at the corner of the youth's mouth. He slowly opened his eyes. In an instant, sunlight broke through the window and woke him up from his beautiful dream. The golden light shone on the thin and weak figure in front of him. The originally unremarkable person, at some point, became as dazzling as a rainbow in a mountain stream. "I will never draw my sword against the weak." It seemed like this was the first time he seriously looked at Hirufei's appearance. The mask covered his face. No matter how stupid this person was, his posture was always upright and straight. The ridicule on the youth's lips dissipated. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up. He looked out the window and felt that the spring sun was brilliant and beautiful. Even the idiot who was usually ridiculed by others seemed respectable. Perhaps he wasn't an idiot after all. When they reached the end of the deep forest, Xiao Ju didn't reply to He Yan's question. He stopped here and said, "I have something to discuss with Li Kuang. You don't have to follow me." He Yan nodded and watched Xiao Ju leave first. Her current relationship with Xiao Ju was a little strange. She couldn't be considered a subordinate. In terms of the title bestowed by His Majesty, her official position naturally couldn't be compared to Xiao Ju's, but she couldn't be considered Xiao Ju's soldier. But if she wasn't considered a subordinate, Muan Lang didn't have any real power. If she didn't follow Xiao Ju, she wouldn't even be able to do anything. Lin Shuanghe waved his hand in front of her. "Sister He?" Ian came back to his senses. "Brother Lin, I was too busy a few days ago. There weren't enough doctors in the Rundu, so I could only bite the bullet and do it." Speaking up to this point, he complained, "My title of white-robed divine doctor is too cheap. I don't take a single cent. Those who don't know would think that I'm a person who likes to do good deeds. Sister, when we return to the capital, you can't tell anyone that I've treated women outside of the capital. The rules can't be broken. If others find out, everyone will come to me for treatment. Our Lin family's doorstep will be trampled to pieces." Lin Shuanghe was a person who could always worry about things that he shouldn't worry about. He Yan was speechless for a moment, then said, "I'll remember." Lin Shuanghe finally relaxed, then said, "I haven't asked you yet. How are you doing here? You're really amazing. You came to the Rundu on your own without even saying anything. The Liangzhou guards almost caused a huge mess. What are you thinking? Even if you want to make a name for yourself, you should take it easy. Why did you come to such a dangerous place? Even if riches and honor are found in danger, we should first protect our lives and then plan for the future." He Yan knew that he was teasing him, so he only smiled. "Sister He," Lin Shuanghe looked at her and stopped waving his fan. He thought for a moment, "Why do I feel that you've changed a lot after not seeing you for so long?" "Have I?" "Yes," Lin Shuanghe replied with certainty. From the first time he saw He Yin in the Liangzhou guards, even when she was heavily injured by Rida Muzi, this girl was still alive and kicking, constantly radiating warmth like the sun. Her eyes were always bright and full of life. It had only been a little over a month now. When he saw He Yin again, this girl seemed to have many things on her mind. She seemed to have become strangely silent. It was as if something had shaved away all her happiness in one night, giving birth to another version of herself. It was a bit unfamiliar, gloomy, as if she used something to separate herself from others, making it impossible to approach. "Did something happen?" he asked. Ian shook her head, saying with a smile, "It's nothing." However, she suddenly thought of another matter and asked Lin Shuanghe, "Brother Lin, in the days I left the Liangzhou guards, did something happen in the Liangzhou guards?" "Why do you say that?" Lin Shuanghe rubbed his chin. "Do you think something's wrong?" Ian hesitated for a moment, but still said, "When I saw the governor this time, he didn't ask me why I came to the Rundu alone, nor did he reprimand me. He seemed very calm. Don't you think this is a bit strange? The governor's personality wasn't like this before." Lin Shuanghe's eyes moved, and he laughed. "This is a very obvious matter to begin with. You came to the Rundu to save the people of the Rundu. Since it's to save people, Huaijin definitely won't say anything. You've been busy and tired these days. Huaijin doesn't even have enough time to worry about you. So why would he reprimand you? Little sister, you might have some misunderstandings about Huaijin. He's actually not such a heartless person. He's very gentle, especially towards the people he likes." Lin Shuanghe's answer was irrelevant, and for a moment, Yin didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence, she could only say, "Forget it. If he doesn't care about this matter, I don't have to keep worrying about it." He Rufei was more important now. He Rufei had committed such a great crime, and she didn't have much time to take revenge bit by bit. As long as He Rufei held the title of General Fei Hong, it would be a disaster for the people of Dawei. "Don't think too much," Lin Shuanghe comforted her. "In a few days, we'll return to Shuajing. When we return to Shuajing, I'll take you around to relax. All right, your family's also in Shuajing, right? It's also a good thing for you to reunite with your father and brother after you return. However, your identity is a bit troublesome, but it's not a big deal. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. We'll think of a solution together." Return to Shuajing? Yin was stunned. She wanted to return to Shuajing, but it was her idea. Why did Lin Shuanghe mean that Xiao Ju wanted to go back as well? Not long after you left the Liang Province Guard, Huaijin received a decree from the capital to bring a portion of the Liang Province Guard's new recruits and the Nan Province Guard soldiers back to Shuajing. However, at that time, we were all worried about the situation in the Rundu. Huaijin and I arrived first, and the soldiers and horses followed behind. In the end, we have to go back. With Yudo's current situation, it's impossible for the world to be as peaceful as before. It's also good to go back earlier. Lin Shuanghe looked at her and asked curiously, "What? You don't want to go back?" Ian shook his head. "No, I'm not. No, it's just a bit unexpected. If Xiao Ju also wanted to go back, then wouldn't they have to travel together again?" She had clearly made up her mind to stay far away from him so as not to implicate him. Now, it seemed that this ill-fated relationship was particularly stubborn. It was inevitable that they would have to live together again. However, her current feelings towards Xiao Ju were extremely complicated. Because of Rufei's actions, she had no choice but to face some problems head-on. Dragging Xiao Ju into this was truly harmful without any benefit. Forget it. Since things had already gotten to this point, there was no point in thinking about it anymore. She could only do as Lin Shuanghe said, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. She could only go and see what would happen. She spoke a few more words with Lin Shuanghe before leaving. Lin Shuanghe looked at Hian's back and propped up his fan under his chin. After thinking for a moment, he sighed and said to himself, he actually didn't reprimand her. It seems that once second young Master Xiao is enlightened, he really is formidable and brilliant. No wonder he's the #1 in the Xian Changwan. He happily followed after her. Yin bid farewell to Lin Shuanghe and planned to return to her room to write about her encounter with Yudo in the Rundu. She could find some clues from every battle. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Before she reached her room, she happened to see someone practicing martial arts in the backyard. The martial artist's movements were very big. Originally, the vegetation in the Rundu had been plucked bare due to the famine. His sword and saber movements directly chopped off the branches, leaving only a bare tree trunk. It looked particularly pitiful. Hearing that someone was coming, the person stopped what he was doing and kept his Fontaine halberd by his side. He turned around to look. Silver robe, long halberd, long hair tied up high, arrogant and proud. Who else could it be but Yin He? General's Yin, Yin said. Oh, it's Yin. Yin walked to the side. His subordinate handed him a soaked handkerchief. He casually wiped his hands and threw it to the side. He walked to the steps and sat down. He did not forget to call out to Yin sit. Yin thought for a moment and sat down beside him. Were you secretly watching me practice my spear just now? Yin said, How is it? Have you never seen such brilliant spear skills before? Yin was speechless for a moment. He smiled and said, It is indeed brilliant. Looking around, in an entire way, there is no one else who has such spear skills other than General Yin. Hearing this, Yin smirked proudly. His gaze towards Yin became gentler. He scoffed, You have good taste. Yin sighed in his heart. After so many years, Yin's temperament did not change at all. As long as one went along with him, it would be easy to please him. When they were at the Xianchang dojo, if Lin Shuanghe and Yin were competing for the last place, then Yin He and Xiao Ju were competing for the first place. However, there was no suspense in their competition. Every time, Yin He was second and Xiao Ju was first. The young people who studied in the dojo all came from good family backgrounds. They were the cream of the crop. It was normal for them to be competitive. However, Yin He's competitive nature was exceptionally strong. Yin still remembered that every few days in the dojo, Yin He would challenge Xiao Ju. It was similar to how Wang Ba challenged her in Liang Province. Xiao Ju was too lazy to bother with such challenges most of the time. When she was annoyed, she would challenge Yin He. Regardless of whether it was civil or martial, archery or horse, the result was the same every time. Yin He was defeated but continued to challenge. In fact, on this point, Yin had always felt that Yin He and she were somewhat similar. Unfortunately, although she had the intention of appreciating each other, Yin He did not appreciate it. Yin hated him very much. He was arrogant by nature and had his eyes on the top of his head. He probably thought that trash was not worth a second look. It would be good if he was like Lin Shuanghe, who had some expertise. However, Yin was useless. In the Xianchang dojo, being useless was a crime. When Yin He was young, he really did everything he could to make fun of Yin. He made her look bad in front of everyone. He secretly made things difficult for her. During the archery and horse competition, he purposely bumped Yin's horse. He really did all kinds of things. Speaking of which, when Yin was studying in the Xianchang dojo, Yin He was probably the number one person she hated the most. Later, she left the Xianchang dojo and joined the army. Xiao Ju also joined the army. Not long after, Yin He also joined the army. However, Yin He could be considered to have inherited his father's business. Now, he was young and was doing well. That day, when the Rundu was in danger, Yin wrote him a letter asking for help. She also felt that with Yin He's temperament, he would come. Although she did not expect him to come with Xiao Ju. If it was a few years ago, Yin would never have thought that there would be a day when she could sit and talk to Yin He calmly. Actually, she didn't know how she had offended Yin He back then. Logically speaking, she hadn't spoken much to Yin He and hadn't hindered him in any way. Why was it that no matter how carefully she treated him, Yin He just couldn't stand her? This question could be considered one of the 10 unsolved mysteries of Yin's youth. Now that Yin He was sitting beside her, although there was still a shadow of his youth between his brows, but he was much calmer. It had been so many years, but he still hated He Rufei. What kind of power was this? Yin said casually, Of course. Everyone says that De Wei has two famous generals. One is General Fei Hong, and the other is General Feng Yan. I don't think so. There was no need to talk about Governor Shao. He was indeed very powerful. However, that General Fei Hong was not as good as he was described to be. The Rundu is so close to Huayuan, but he did not come to the city's aid. Moreover, he won the battle in Huayuan with a heavy loss. How can he be compared to General Yin? I really don't know how he became famous. Generally speaking, if one cursed He Rufei to death, they would be able to gain Yin He's favor. This was definitely true. As expected, Yin He's eyes lit up when he heard this. He laughed and said, Muan Lang, I think you are very different from others. Just based on this point alone, you are already better than many people. Although I don't agree with what you said about Xiao Huaijin, He Rufei, you are absolutely right. He really can't be compared to me. He rolled his eyes silently in his heart and said, Yes, but General Yin, you also don't like General Fei Hong? I thought that all generals liked him. Don't like him? And he shook his head and said unconcernedly, Not really. I just feel that he is disappointing and doesn't deserve this title. Yin was elated. Was this going to reveal the top 10 unsolved mysteries of her youth? After so many years, she finally knew the reason why he was always targeting her. What do you mean by disappointing? Yin tilted her head and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with genuine doubts. Because they both disliked He Rufei, he found the young man in front of him more pleasing to the eye. He said without thinking, Of course he is disappointing. He received Xiao Huaijin's swordsmanship guidance, but he still practiced to that extent. If it was me, I could do 10,000 times better than him. Xiao Huaijin was also a very strange person. What kind of foresight did he have? He didn't teach the academy's outstanding talents, but instead spent time teaching a fool. However, he was stingy with sparring with me. Tell me, how can there be such a person in this world? Swordsmanship guidance? Yes. And he looked at her and said, You didn't expect it, right? The so-called unparalleled swordsmanship of General Fei Hong was actually taught by Xiao Huaijin. Do you think he's crazy? Chapter 181. Yin looked at Yin He in a daze. His mind was blank. At this moment, he did not know how to respond. There was only one thought that kept surging in his mind. How could it be? How could it be? No way. Yin tried to make his expression look relaxed. Military Governor Xiao is not such a warm-hearted person. I knew you would have this reaction. Yin He was a little impatient. That's why I've been too lazy to mention this to anyone all these years. No one would believe me anyway. However, I can swear on my head that this matter is absolutely true. That year when we were studying in the school, Xiao Huaijin, that lunatic, actually wrote notes to He Rufei every day to teach him swordsmanship. He seemed to be thinking about the past. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. Every day was simply terrifying. At that time, he was still young and full of vigor. Before Xiao Huaijin left the mountain, Yin He had taken the first place in the Xianchang school. After Xiao Huaijin entered the Xianchang school, he could only take the second place. This feeling was actually very infuriating. Either he had never been the first and would always be the second, or he had been the first and would always be the first. However, he had always been the first and then the second, and had never surpassed the first. This was actually very damaging to his confidence. It would make others think that Yin He, was no match for Xiao Ju. They were all geniuses. Who would really submit to the other? And he wished that he could spend 12 hours a day studying and the other 12 hours to compete with Xiao Ju. After all, he would gain something from every competition. Know thyself and know thy enemy to be victorious in every battle. Unfortunately, this second young master, Xiao, was not a patient person. He could even ignore the teacher's words. As for him, he would completely ignore him, and he had challenged him 8 to 10 times. If Xiao Ju could reply once, he would be in a good mood, and he was also arrogant. However, compared to Xiao Ju's calm indifference, he was still slightly inferior. He was almost angered to death by Xiao Ju. Therefore, when Yin He was young, he didn't have to worry about food or clothing. His life was smooth sailing. The only adversity he faced was Xiao Ju. At that time, He thought that his only wish in life was to defeat Xiao Ju. In the Virtuous Prosperity Dojo, the competition for first and second place was so fierce. Similarly, there was no lack of people pursuing the first and second place from the bottom, such as Lin Shuanghe and He Rufei. Lin Shuanghe was fine. As a descendant of the imperial physician clan, his ambitions did not lie in this field. It was fine even if he did not excel in civil or military matters. However, the eldest young master of the He clan was very strange. He Rufei was especially diligent and serious. Even if the improvement was small, he still wanted to try every possibility. Towards such people, Yan He could only look down on them at most, but he could not say that he hated them. For a genius like him to look at mediocre people, there was always a sense of superiority. However, something changed Yan He's opinion. The matter of He Rufei practicing swordsmanship at night. He had accidentally discovered it. Rather than saying that Yan He was chasing after He Rufei's footsteps, it was more accurate to say that he was paying attention to Xiao Ju's every move. On a certain night, Yan He saw Xiao Ju sitting in the backyard watching He Rufei practice swordsmanship. He used his clever brain to think for a long time, but could not figure out the reason behind it. What was Xiao Ju doing? Couldn't sleep and came out to watch the performance? Or did he think that such a clumsy He Rufei would make him laugh? But if that was the case, then it was fine if it was just 1 or 2 days, but he came every day. No wonder he was always sleeping in the dojo during the day. So it was because he did not sleep at night? Xiao Ju practiced swordsmanship with He Rufei every night, but he did not say or do anything. He only drank tea. He Rufei also had a good temperament. Even though he was being watched like a monkey, he did not get angry. He diligently did his own things. And for some reason, Yan He also came out every day and secretly watched. He only felt that Xiao Ju must be up to something. He definitely would not do such a useless thing. Later on, when Yan He looked back at himself, he only felt that he could not bear to look at himself. If there were other people in the backyard who looked at them, they would probably think that the Xianchong dojo had raised 3 lunatics. But at that time, Yan He only had one thought. He wanted to see what Xiao Ju was up to. In the end, he really did find a clue. He Rufei's swordsmanship improved day by day. This was a little strange. He Rufei was in the dojo, and the teacher who taught him was also very outstanding. But he did not seem to improve so quickly. And He Rufei, who practiced swordsmanship at night, was able to fix the especially obvious problems of the previous day. Compared to the beginning, his swordsmanship had improved greatly. And he did not believe that He Rufei had such intelligence. He thought for a long time in his heart. As expected, he caught Xiao Ju, who left a note on He Rufei's table. He opened the letter. It was densely filled with the flaws of last night's swordsmanship and the areas that needed improvement. And he said sourly, "You are more meticulous than the teacher in the dojo." Xiao Ju looked at him coldly and said indifferently, "You follow me every day. Do you want to be like those girls outside?" Those girls outside were all Xiao Ju's admirers. If they had nothing to do, they would occasionally pass by the dojo. After all, Xiao Ju had the most beautiful face in the capital. His indifferent and lazy appearance was very seductive. Many people were mesmerized by him, and he threw the letter on the table and looked at him with disgust. Who is like those girls? Xiao Ju turned to leave, and he hurriedly followed him out. He was not satisfied and said, "You practice swordsmanship with him every night in the courtyard just to give him pointers? You've been following me every night just to watch me teach him swordsmanship?" Xiao Ju's reply was perfunctory. "You are crazy," Yan He said in disbelief. "You are wasting your time on that kind of person." Although he did not like Xiao Ju, he had to admit that Xiao Ju was very talented. Just like how he treated Xiao Ju as a rival, in Yan He's heart, Xiao Ju should also treat him as a rival. He should practice hard every day to maintain his first place. But now, it seemed that not only was he not diligent, he did not care about himself. Instead, he went to watch the last place practice swordsmanship and give him pointers. And he found it hard to understand and felt angry. Did this mean that in Xiao Ju's heart, he was not as eye-catching as He Rufei? What was this? Hey, are you listening to me? Seeing that Xiao Ju was ignoring him, and he was anxious. He walked in front of Xiao Ju. Why are you wasting your time on that kind of trash? Is that so? Xiao Ju's beautiful eyes glanced at him. He walked up the rockery and found a place to lie down. He put his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. I don't think so. Don't think so. Don't think he is trash. You, and he said angrily, you give him pointers every day, but he only improved a little. There are so many people in the Xian Chong dojo. Why did you choose Hirufei? Do you want to try teaching the last place to first place to satisfy your desire? Then let me tell you, give up. With Hirufei's talent, it is impossible. Xiao Ju said, I am not that bored. His indifferent attitude made Yin He even angrier. He turned around and walked out. I'm going to tell Hirufei to stop hogging you. Using the first place in the Xian Chong dojo to teach you to this level. What a joke. Xiao Ju's lazy voice came from behind. Competition. And he stopped in his tracks. What? In the future, if you want to compete with me, I will agree 3 times. He did not open his eyes. His eyelashes drooped down, contrasting with his jade-like skin. He leaned against the rockery and pretended to be asleep. He looked like a handsome youth in a painting. The condition is to keep it a secret. And he stood in the same place, his heart in turmoil. In the end, he could not resist the temptation of Xiao Ju agreeing to compete with him. He gritted his teeth and said 2 times, Deal. The sunlight shone in the courtyard. It was hot, and he sighed and said, Then, as the price, I will keep it a secret for him and will not tell Hirufei. Even though many years had passed, and he was still angry when he talked about this matter again. If Hirufei had Xiao Ju's swordsmanship, it would have been good, but his improvement was not considered a genius. In Yin He's opinion, it was a waste of Xiao Ju's careful teaching. But Xiao Ju was really patient with Hirufei. Even though he refused to compete with Yin he still guided Hirufei wholeheartedly every day. And he did not know where the injustice and jealousy in him came from. It was probably because he could not stand the fact that a person with mediocre talent was guided by a famous teacher, and he even ruined the teacher's reputation. Later on, he made a name for himself. Yin he snorted and said, But in my opinion, if it was me who had received Xiao Huaijin's guidance, I would definitely be more than that. I originally thought that he did not disappoint me. I did not expect the battle in Huayuan to make me speechless. He is still the same as before. I think he should get rid of the title General Fei Hong as soon as possible. Otherwise, he will become a joke to others. Kid, Yin he raised his eyes to look at the person beside him. Why aren't you saying anything? Yin was startled. The sun was shining so brightly that her eyes were a little dizzy. She did not know if it was because she was shocked by Yin He's words or something else. She muttered, I am just very surprised. More than surprised. In the beginning, I thought that Xiao Huaijin had gone crazy, Yin he said sarcastically. Also, logically speaking, Hirufei owed Xiao Huaijin such a big favor. I thought that their relationship was very good. I did not expect that in these few years, the two of them were not very close. This time, the Rundu is in trouble. Huayuan is so close to the Rundu. Xiao Huaijin actually wrote a letter to me and did not contact Hirufei. It seems that Xiao Huaijin has kept this matter a secret until now. Hirufei does not know about it. However, I cannot say for sure. After all, that was a matter from many years ago. The two of them are equally famous now. It is natural that Hirufei would have a dispute. And he really took the opportunity to smear Hirufei's name. However, Yin did not have the mind to argue with him. Her eyes were filled with. Back then, her swordsmanship was secretly taught by Xiao Ju. She had always thought that it was a kind teacher from the Xian Chong dojo who saw that her swordsmanship was not good enough and secretly taught her. She had always been very grateful for this. If it was not for the He family's incident, she would have been able to see who that teacher was with her own eyes. Not being able to thank him properly had always been a regret in He Yan's heart. But now, from Yin He's mouth, she learned the unbelievable truth. It was actually Xiao Ju. If it was Xiao Ju, everything actually made sense. His skills were not inferior to the teachers in the Xian Chong dojo. Yin did not think of Xiao Ju only because of Xiao Ju's personality. He was not someone who was willing to help others. Moreover, their relationship could not be considered close. So at that time, he came to the backyard every night to watch her practice swordsmanship and drink tea. It was not to pass the time, but to give her pointers. Ian took a deep breath. Why did she only realize it now? What's with your expression? Ian, he frowned. You look very excited. Ian coughed lightly and said, I just feel that military governor Xiao is really a good person. What good person? I think he is sick. This person is good at everything in the academy. Who can tell that his eyesight is so bad? Yin he patted the dust off his body and stood up. He grabbed the Fangtian halberd beside him. He Rufei is not happy to talk about him. Forget it. I'm going to continue practicing with the halberd. What about you? Yan's thoughts were in a mess. Naturally, he did not have the mood to watch this person flaunt his skills in front of him. He said, if that is the case, then I will not disturb General Yan. I will return to my room first. Yan turned and left. The sky gradually darkened. Xiao Ju came out of the hall. Li Kuang wiped the sweat off his forehead. Because of the Iluo incident, he did not have the face to see Yan. When he saw Yan, he felt nervous and fearful. He originally thought that it would be better to talk to Xiao Ju. However, compared to the young Muan Lang, this right military governor was even more difficult to deal with. He carefully asked about everything that happened in the Runda these days, including the scarecrow at the city gate tower and the night attack on the enemy camp to burn their provisions. Li Kuang did not take credit for himself. He completely exposed Yan's idea. As for the women and Iluo that were captured, Xiao Ju had already seen them. When Li Kuang repeated the story, this young military governor did not seem as agitated as Yan. Instead, he seemed rather calm. However, that calmness in Li Kuang's eyes made him feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. After asking about everything that happened in the Rundu, Li Kuang also knew that they would be returning to Shuajing in a few days. Li Kuang's heart let out a big sigh of relief. No matter what, the Runda problem was solved, and he would leave a portion of his troops here. However, those Yudo would not dare to come again. The city was finally defended. However, it was not defended. Li Kuang understood one thing very clearly. He had lost the hearts of the people. His position as military governor would not last for long. The tall and burly man sat alone in the room. After a long while, he buried his hands in his palms and silently cried. This was the punishment he deserved. The night in the Rundu was very cool. The heat of the day had completely faded at night. However, because of the famine in the city, there was no light from the plants and trees. There was a sense of desolation that only existed in autumn. Xiao Ju placed a drink of autumn on the table. Just as he turned around and took off his outer garment, he heard someone knocking on the door. The knocking was polite and respectful. He paused. Come in. The door opened. Ian stood at the door. He looked at him and asked, Military governor, can I come in? When he was in the Liang province guards, this person never knocked on the door. When he wanted to find someone, he did not even go through the main door to save time. He directly knocked on the door a few times. He did not care if the person on the other side answered. He just treated it as if he had already said hello. Then, he skillfully opened the door and popped his head out from behind the door. He had a bright smile on his face and called out with perfect pronunciation, Military governor. He had only stayed in the Rundu for a little more than a month, but he had become so obedient. However, there was a hint of politeness that was hard to detect. Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows slightly. He put down his outer garment and asked calmly, What's the matter? He didn't answer her, yes or no. Anyway, Ian would come in by himself. As expected, Ian walked in naturally and closed the door after being obedient for only a moment. The house looked luxurious. After all, the people in the Rundu relied on the provisions brought by Yan He to survive. Naturally, there were no tea leaves. Xiao Ju picked up the white jade porcelain teapot on the table and poured water into the teacups. Ian walked over and said, Let me do it. She took the teapot from Xiao Ju's hands. Xiao Ju didn't decline. When he moved, he accidentally touched Yan's finger. Yan's heart trembled slightly. He raised his head and looked at the other person. This person's eyes were lowered, and he couldn't see what kind of expression he had. Yan pretended that nothing had happened. He walked to the other side of the table and slowly poured water. Xiao Ju had already broken the rules of physical intimacy many times. However, when she was in the Liang province guards, there were many inconveniences. She tried her best to ignore this. However, now, she was well aware of many things. She also understood her feelings for Xiao Ju. As the saying goes, one can be unyielding if one has no desires. If one has a guilty conscience, one would feel uncomfortable. She scolded herself in her heart for being muddle-headed. She tried her best to speak calmly. Military Governor, Brother Lin said today that we will be returning to the capital together in a few days. Xiao Ju sat down in front of the table. You don't want to go back? No. She originally planned to return to the capital. It's just that why did His Majesty suddenly summon you back to the capital? And Generals Yin? If all of them return to the capital, won't it be dangerous outside? These Yudo were like tigers watching their prey. Even if His Majesty was worried about the safety of the capital, there was no need to summon all of Wei's valiant generals back. If the Yudo were to make a comeback at this time, although the possibility was not high, they still had to be prepared. We will know when we return. Xiao Ju did not directly answer her question. That's right. Before returning, it was not good to talk about it. However, she did not really come here for this matter. She just wanted to find a reason to start the conversation. She handed one of the teacups to Xiao Ju and held the other one in her hand. Holding the warm tea in her hand, the girl lowered her head and took a sip. After a while, she raised her head and looked like she was trying to find something to say. Military Governor, I met Generals Yin during the day. Xiao Ju nodded and lowered her head to read. His attitude these days was very strange. He was cold, but he was so calm that he could be called gentle. He was gentle, but he did not take the initiative to talk to He Yin. Of course, he did not take the initiative to cause trouble for He Yin. He Yin did not understand this subtle sense of distance. Generals Yin seems to dislike General Fei Hong very much. He Yin could only bite the bullet and continue. I sat with him for a while and listened to him talk. Only then did I know that Military Governor, General Fei Hong, and Generals Yin are classmates. Her pretentious tone made Xiao Ju pause for a moment. After a while, she said, "Stay away from him." Yin pushed the teacup forward and looked at her. I asked Generals Yin why he hated young Master He so much. Generals Yin told me. She deliberately dragged her words and looked at Xiao Ju's reaction. Generals Yin was jealous because you taught General Fei Hong swordsmanship every night. That's why he hated him for so many years. Yin held her chin and asked with a puzzled expression, "So, Military Governor, do you actually like General Fei Hong?" She looked like a curious subordinate who wanted to hear about her superior's story, but her heart was beating very fast. Although Yin said so, Yin still wanted to verify it personally. He didn't know if what Yin said was true, and he didn't know why Xiao Ju did this. Xiao Ju closed the book and looked at her calmly. "I'm not gay. I didn't say you were gay." Yin said, "What I mean is, do you admire General Fei Hong a lot? That's why you helped him secretly? Were you really the one who taught him swordsmanship every night?" Xiao Ju did not say anything. Based on his personality, this was a silent admission. Yin suddenly sat up straight. It was hard to describe how she felt at this moment. After a while, she asked, "Why did you teach him?" Xiao Ju looked up at her. "Why are you asking this?" Yin lowered her head and hid the emotions in her eyes. "I just feel that it's not worth it for you." I heard from Generals Yin that when young Master he was in the Xianchang school, he was not very good at his studies and was very ordinary in both civil and martial arts. I don't know why the Military Governor chose him to teach him swordsmanship. And you did so much, but you didn't tell young Master he? Does young Master he still not know that you were the one who helped him that year? Don't you think it's not worth it for you to do this? It's just a casual act. There's no need to worry. Xiao Ju said calmly. What does it matter if he knows or not? Yin stared straight at him. She thought to herself, it does matter. If I knew it was him, maybe my feelings for him would have lasted longer. Maybe when Su Jihing appeared, I wouldn't have fallen head over heels for him. She had been lonely for too long. It was Xiao Ju who appeared first, but it was too late for her to fall in love. Xiao Ju seemed to have noticed her strange expression. He frowned and said, "I feel so sorry for the military governor." He smiled. "But this young master, he is too much. Even if the military governor hides your achievements and reputation and doesn't want others to know about it. Young master, he doesn't even know how to investigate the kind person who helped him silently. If you just let him be, he should have found out about you earlier." The military governor also contributed to his current reputation. She was so anxious. Xiao Ju looked at her thoughtfully. He suddenly smiled and said, "Actually, he also tried to find me." Yin was stunned. Under the light, his face was calm and handsome. He seemed to be reminiscing about the past. His beautiful black eyes were deep, and there were ripples in them. It almost made people drown. Actually, Xiao Ju had seen He Rufei look for people without rhyme or reason. Every time she wrote on the notes, He Rufei expressed her gratitude to him. Some were fearful, some were clumsy, and there was even one time when she tried to catch him. But how could he catch him? He sat on the tree and watched He Rufei walk under the tree. Although he was wearing a mask, he could imagine this person's dejected appearance. It was inexplicably a little pitiful. He finally relented and agreed to let He Rufei see him, although the result might not be very happy. Once, he and I agreed to meet at the school. And then, did you meet him? The elegant man lowered his head and said indifferently, "I'm going," but he didn't come that night. Chapter 182. When she returned to her room, Hien lay on her bed, tossing and turning restlessly. The window was open, and a little wind came in, blowing her awake. The conversation she had with Xiao Ju was still ringing in her ears. It turned out that on the night she left the He family to join the army, Xiao Ju had actually come to meet her. It was just a freak combination of circumstances that caused them to miss each other. Once they missed each other, there wouldn't be another chance. Just like how Hien didn't know that the person who secretly taught him swordsmanship back then was Xiao Ju, the current Xiao Ju wouldn't know that the person he secretly helped back then had changed. She tried so hard to hide her identity, and so much she wanted to thank him as his classmate back then. It turned out that she and Xiao Ju had so many fateful encounters in both her previous and current lives. It was just that their fates were short, and it just had to happen now. Hien sat up, thought for a while, and got off the bed with determination. She walked to the table and lit the oil lamp with a match. Zhao Shiming was a scholar, and the 4 treasures of the study were placed everywhere in the room. She ground the ink, found a piece of paper, sat down at the table, and started writing slowly. All the matters in the rundu were settled in 3 days. It was also time for Xiao Ju and the others to leave. Before Hien left, she found Zhao Shiming. After the Yi Luo incident, Hien didn't speak to Li Kuang again. Every time she saw Li Kuang, she would think of the sweet girl with dimples on her cheeks when she smiled. She thought that Li Kuang was the same. Every time he bumped into Hien, he would avoid her gaze. So there were some things that she didn't want to mention to Li Kuang. Zhao Shiming was sitting in the room, reading official documents. The rundu was besieged by the Yudo, and the merchants in the city went on strike. Everything was in a mess. Now that the Yudo had been defeated and the rundu had returned to its peaceful state, it would take time to restore its peaceful days. "Master Zhao." Hien walked into the room and called out to him. Zhao Shiming raised his head from the documents. Seeing that it was Hien, he paused for a moment, then stood up and said with a warm smile, "Xiao He Darren, what brings you here today?" Zhao Shiming liked Hien very much. He was a scholar, so he couldn't get along with a boorish man like Li Kuang. As for Xiao Ju and Yin He, one was cold while the other was arrogant. Just looking at them made him fearful. Hien, on the other hand, was different. He was young, intelligent, brave, kind, and loyal. He was also handsome and elegant. At first glance, one could tell that he was cultured and likable. If it weren't for the fact that his granddaughter was too young, Zhao Shiming would have wanted to recruit this young man as his grandson-in-law. Hien smiled and said, "Lord Zhao is too polite. I am here to bid farewell to Mr. Zhao. Tomorrow, I will be returning to Shuo Jing with the governor. Thank you for taking care of me during my stay in the Rundu. Zhao Shiming liked this young man even more. Look at him, he even specially came to bid farewell to him. He was very polite. He smiled and replied, Xiao He Darren, please don't say that. You are the benefactor who saved the Rundu. This time, I didn't have much to entertain you when I came to the Rundu. Instead, I caused Xiao He Darren to suffer a lot. If Xiao He Darren comes to the Rundu again in the future, I will definitely treat you well. I hope Xiao He Darren won't hold it against me for being rude this time. He Yin supported Zhao Shiming's hand that was about to bow and said, This junior doesn't dare. He actually addressed him as a junior? Zhao Shiming was stunned. Before he could regain his senses, he saw the young man in front of him looking at him with a solemn expression. Actually, I came here today to ask for Lord Zhao's help. Zhao Shiming was not unfamiliar with this expression. Previously, when He Yin asked his men to help pass a message to Yin, he also looked like this. Did he have a favor to ask of him again? Zhao Shiming was very pleased. He Yin looked for him instead of Li Kuang. It was clear that he treated him as one of his own. The things that Mu and Lang asked for were usually very easy. It was an honor for him to be able to help. Thinking of this, Zhao Shiming smiled and said, Xiao He Darren, please feel free to ask. I will definitely do my best. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Shiming saw the young man in front of him lift the corner of his robe and kneel down in front of him. You. He was shocked. Then, thank you very much, Lord Zhao. The servants outside did not know what the people inside were talking about. After a while, when He Yin walked out of the door, the servants went in to serve tea. Only then did they see Zhao Shiming slumped in front of the table. He looked absent-minded and his gaze was unfocused. Master, the servant called out to him. Zhao Shiming finally regained his senses. He swallowed his saliva and said, It's nothing, it's nothing. He clenched the letter in his hand tightly. On the other side, He Yin walked out of the door and took a deep breath. She did not know whether her decision was right or wrong, but it seemed to be the best way to get Xiao Ju out of the picture. A person walked towards her. She was as delicate and beautiful as a flower. It was Ying Xiang. When Ying Xiang saw He Yin, she bowed and greeted He Yin He Darren. Now, she did not call He Yin young master He. Instead, she called him He Darren. Miss Ying Xiang, He Yin replied. When he saw that she was holding something that looked like clothes in her hands, he could not help but take a second look. Ying Xiang noticed her gaze and smiled. Fourth young master asked this servant to tidy up a bit. We will be leaving for Shuo capital tomorrow. The weather in Rundu is very good, so the clothes will dry quickly. Returning to Shuo capital, He Yin frowned slightly. You are also leaving tomorrow? Chu Zhao was originally on his way back to Shuo capital, but he was trapped in the city because of the Yudo siege. Now that the Yudo had left, they naturally had to leave as well. However, he did not expect that he would be traveling with Xiao Ju. Yes, Ying Xiang replied with a smile. Military Governor Xiao also knows that fourth young master is traveling with everyone. There might be other Yudo along the way, so it is better to have more people to take care of each other. Xiao Ju did not want to take care of Chu Zhao. However, since Xiao Ju already knew about this, it was useless for her to say anything more. That day, when Li Kuang wanted to kill the captive women, Chu Zhao also stood up for him. No matter what his goal was, He Yin should thank him on the surface. Help me thank fourth young master for standing on the side of the captive women in front of the army commander that day. He Yin said. Ying Xiang's eyes curved in a crescent. Yes, He Darren. After He Yin left, Ying Xiang carried the clothes back into the room. Chu Zhao was standing in front of the window. Ying Xiang packed the clothes into a bag. Her movements were very fast, and in just a moment, everything was packed up. Fourth young master, Ying Xiang walked to Chu Zhao's side and said in a low voice, Just now on the road, this servant met Miss He. Miss He asked this servant to thank fourth young master for standing up for the captive women in front of Lord Li. Chu Zhao smiled and did not say anything. After a moment of silence, Ying Xiang said, Fourth young master should not have done that. Chu Zhao, oh, perhaps the prime minister's men are in the city. If the prime minister sees fourth young master like this, he will not be happy, Su Jingfu was a person who hated others who acted on their own initiative. Since the Rundu incident had nothing to do with him, not only did Chu Zhao speak up, but he also brought up Su Jingfu. Once Su Jingfu knew about this, he would definitely be unhappy with Chu Zhao. What's done is done. Don't worry. Chu Zhao smiled slightly. As for the Prime Minister, I will explain it to him. Why did young master do that? Ying Xiang asked softly. Even if young master did not do anything, with Missy's ability, no one would be able to make things difficult for her. Chu Zhao did not answer. He only looked at the sky outside the window. Why? It was probably because the way she stood in front of those women reminded him of the time when he was young in a brothel. When someone bullied him, Yi Runmei stood in front of him. In his life, he rarely had anyone to protect him. Other than Yi Runmei, Yin was the only one who could protect him. She protected those women just like how she protected him in Jiang. One person protected another without any selfish motives, without any blood ties, and without any intimate relationship. She just did it because she felt that it was the right thing to do. She was so flamboyant that it made people envious. She was so upright that it made people jealous. She was like a ray of light that even people who were close to her could not help but be illuminated. That was why he stood up at that moment and thought that he was a righteous and brave person. However, he was not a ray of light after all. He was just a shadow. The day to leave the Rundu had arrived. Li Kuang and Zhao Shiming went out of the city to send them off. The southern prefecture soldiers and the Liangzhou guards did not set off with Xiao Ju. They were rushing back to the capital and only brought Yan He's troops with them. The city was bleak. Although there was sunlight, it seemed to be covered with a layer of faint gray. Yan felt sentimental. The last time she left the Rundu, she was still Deputy General He. She also chatted and laughed with Li Kuang. Now that she was leaving the Rundu, the two of them were no longer the same as before. Time flew by quickly. The grapevines in the Rundu had already grown into new clumps. A group of people stood at the city gate. Yin was about to get on her horse when she suddenly heard someone's voice behind her. Lord Xiaohe. Yin turned her head to look. She saw that many people had gathered in front of the Rundu city gate. They did not dare to go forward. They just stood on both sides of the street and looked at them silently. A group of women walked out from the end of the crowd. The one who called out to her was the leader. They were dressed in neat clothes, and there were still scars on their faces that had not yet healed. They were the captives that Yin had rescued from the hands of the Wutuo people during the night attack on the enemy camp. They were also the women that Yin had saved from the Kuang's sword. Yin still remembered the woman who spoke. That day, she was the one who tearfully persuaded him not to fight with Li Kuang and sacrificed herself willingly. However, Yin later found out from Zhao Shiming that this woman originally lived in a village outside the city. After the Yudo came, he killed her husband and son. She was the only one left in her family. She originally thought that she had been defiled by the Yudo and was afraid of the strange gazes of the people outside. Because her family was not around, she already had the intention to commit suicide. Therefore, when Li Kuang came to find her, she was the first to accept. That day, if Yin did not stand up, if Xiao Ju did not arrive, perhaps these women would have died under Li Kuang's sword. Li Kuang's expression was a little uneasy. There were many things that one did not realize in the current situation. But when things were over and one looked back, one would realize how crazy they were. Those women walked in front of Yin and knelt down. Without saying a word, they kowtowed to Yin a few times. Yin was stunned. "You all, thank you, Lord Xiaohe," they said. The women's spirits were much better than before. Perhaps it was the food that Yin brought that filled their stomachs, or perhaps it was the words that he said that day that gave them the courage to live on. Zhao Shiming walked to Yan's side and said in a low voice, "Lord Xiaohe, these women, those who still have family members, have gone home. Those who are homeless have been placed together by the government. They will work, and in the future, the situation that Lord Xiao he is worried about will not happen. He solemnly promised Yin, I will take good care of them." Yin was slightly relieved. He bowed to Zhao Shiming. "Thank you, Lord Zhao." Zhao Shiming stroked his beard and smiled. "It's my duty. Since they are from the Rundu, As the parent official of the Rundu, I should take good care of them. Ian also smiled. There were many things in the world that would change for the better bit by bit. As long as someone did it, change would eventually happen, no matter how small the change was. She helped the leader of the women up and said softly, "Let them get up too. Live well in the future. Remember, I save your lives. No matter what, don't give up on your lives." The woman nodded. Yanni stood under the city gate. He crossed his arms and said, "Why does this fellow look more popular than you?" He cast a sidelong glance at Xiao Ju. "Isn't he your subordinate? Why aren't you better than him?" Lin Shuanghe smiled and said, "Brother, he is gentle and amiable. Of course, everyone likes him. There aren't many people in the world who are considerate of others. There are even fewer people who are willing to draw their swords for the sake of other safety." Yet he couldn't stand Lin Shuanghe's unprofessional behavior. He sneered, "What's wrong with Brother He? Is everyone in the Liang province guards so chaotic?" "Chaotic?" Lin Shuanghe nodded. "They're even more chaotic. It's just that you don't know about it." Ying Xiang stood beside Chu Zhao and quietly watched as the girl bid farewell to the women she saved and boarded the carriage. The citizens of the Rundu city and the city guards didn't say anything, but their gazes followed He Yin with gratitude. She was indeed a likable girl, whether it was in Jiang or the Rundu. "Let's go." Chu Zhao turned around and boarded his own carriage. The city gates opened and the soldiers and horses marched. The sunlight shone on the end of the long road. It was like a bright road that led to the future. It took 10 days to reach Jinling from the Rundu city. After passing Jinling city, they went straight to Shuo capital. The soldiers and horses that were hurrying on their way sat down and rested in the bushes. Lin Shuanghe was watching He Yin roasting eggs. He was a pampered young master who didn't do any household chores. Naturally, he couldn't do such rough chores. He Yin knew how to cook too, but he saw that the fish he roasted was so black that it was hard to eat. Later on, he decided to do it himself. Xiao Ju was talking to Qi Wu on the other side. He Yin and Lin Shuanghe sat together. Lin Shuanghe watched her skillful movements and sighed. "Brother He, you're really good at everything. You can climb over walls and beat hooligans. I've seen so many." He lowered his voice. "None of the women can compare to you. Really, sister, when you reach Shuo capital, you'll still be number one in my heart." He Yin threw the roasted eggs into his arms. "You flatter me." Lin Shuanghe hurriedly peeled the shells and asked her, "When we reach Shuo capital, what do you want to do?" "There's nothing in Liangzhou. Shuo capital is prosperous. If you have time, I'll take you to the market every day." What kind of situation was this? This person still wanted to play. Ian was speechless for a moment. She thought of another matter and asked Lin Shuanghe, "Oh right, why didn't Dr. Shin come with you to Rundu this time? She should be going back to Shuo capital." When Ian left the Liangzhou guards, she sealed Shun Mushue's acupoints. Although it was to protect her, she wasn't sure what happened to Shun Mushue after that. This time, Xiao Ju, Yin He, and Lin Shuanghe came, but they didn't see Shin Mushue. However, Xiao Ju was going back to Shuo capital. Shin Mushue had no reason to stay in the Liangzhou guard alone. "Dr. Shun," Lin Shuanghe answered matter-of-factly, "She's a girl. When Huaijin and I rushed to the Rundu, we didn't rest day and night. How could she stand this? If we bring her along, I'm afraid that she'll slow us down. So it's better not to bring her along. As for the medical officer, I alone am enough." Huaijin asked Shun Han and the others to bring Dr. Shun over later. He nodded. In the next moment, Lin Shuanghe's face suddenly came close and looked at her mischievously. "Why did you mention Dr. Shun alone? Are you jealous?" "Jealous? Jealous of what?" Yin was so scared that she almost smashed his head with a tree branch. Hearing this, she just sat up straight and calmly said, "I sealed her acupoints before I left. I just feel guilty." "Is that really the case?" Lin Shuanghe deliberately dragged out his words. "If that's the case, then Huaijin's painstaking efforts will be in vain." What painstaking efforts?" Lin Shuanghe stuffed an egg into his mouth and said slowly, "You won't care even if I tell you. It's better not to tell you." Yin was so anxious that she wanted to grab Lin Shuanghe's head and shake it with all her might to see what it was that was shaking out. However, Lin Shuanghe was a cunning person when it came to matters between men and women. Moreover, he was close to Xiao Ju. If he really got some confirmation and turned around to tell Xiao Ju, they wouldn't even be friends. That would be extremely awkward. She could only sit there reservedly. Even though her heart was pounding, her expression was calm and indifferent. Then I really don't care. Just don't say it. Lin Shuanghe looked at her pretentious appearance and tried his best to hold back his laughter. He thought to himself, let's see how long you can hold back. Young people. Young people. Thousands of miles away in Liangzhou, the guard station was busy at this moment. Liang Ping was helping to check if there was anything missing in the room. They were about to leave for Shuajing. A portion of the Liangzhou guard was left behind, and the rest were going to the capital. Shenhan was going to leave with them. Liang Ping, Ma Damei, and the other instructors were going to stay at the Liangzhou guard. Shen Muxue was naturally going to leave as well. Many days ago, when Xiao Ju and Lin Shuanghe were about to leave for the Rundu, Shen Muxue had asked to go with them. However, he was rejected by Xiao Ju. His rejection was very straightforward, and she didn't say why. However, when Lin Shuanghe saw Shen Muxue's ugly expression, he tried to smooth things over with a smile. Miss Shen, the situation in the Rundu is critical. Huijin and I will be traveling day and night. How can a girl like you follow us? If you get hurt, even if you don't mind, I won't be able to bear it. In any case, Shen Jiaodo and the others will leave in the future. When you come back together, Shen Jiaodo will take good care of you. The speed of soldiers and horses is slow, and there are many of them. Huijin and I will be relieved to protect you. Isn't that right? Shen Muxue didn't say anything. Lin Shuanghe took it as a silent agreement and turned to leave with a smile. Shen Muxue looked at his back and asked, Young Master Lin, second young Master Xiao, is going to the Rundu for Heian, right? Lin Shuanghe paused and looked at her. His gaze was sincere and puzzled. Why would you think that? Shen Muxue pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She knew that it was ridiculous to say this. Xiao Ju wasn't someone who would easily change for someone, but she still felt uneasy. The sound from outside interrupted her memories. Liang Ping called out to her, Dr. Shen, is there anything else you want to carry onto the carriage? Shen Muxue came back to her senses and answered as she walked out the door. Liang Ping stood outside. The sun shone on his face and made his face red. He was sweating profusely. He was holding a stack of boxes in his hands and was walking unsteadily towards the carriage. Xiao Ju left in a hurry and didn't pack his things. Before he left, he instructed Shen Han to take everything in his room with him when he returned to Shuajing. Fortunately, Xiao Ju didn't have many things with him. Other than some clothes, there wasn't much left. Shen Muxue saw that Liang Ping was walking unsteadily, so she stepped forward and said, Let me help you. Liang Ping's face turned even redder. No need, no need. The chief instructor told me that these things belong to the governor and asked me to organize them myself. How can I trouble Dr. Shen? He sighed in his heart. Miss Shen was really kind-hearted and didn't put on airs. As the daughter of a big family, she didn't despise martial artists like him. Shen Muxue didn't know what Liang Ping was thinking. He only heard that these things belonged to Xiao Ju and said, You're carrying so many things at once. It's inevitable that you'll drop them. Don't worry, I'll help you. As he spoke, he helped carry the topmost box. The box wasn't big. He walked forward with Liang Ping. Liang Ping wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Seeing that Shen Muxue didn't seem to be struggling, he relaxed a little. He smiled. Thank you, Dr. Shen. The two of them walked to the side of the carriage. Liang Ping let Shen Muxue get on the carriage first. He would go and carry the boxes himself. It was hot outside. Shen Muxue nodded in agreement. She sat quietly with the box in her hands and looked at the busy soldiers in the distance. Her gaze fell on the box in her arms. The box looked ordinary. She didn't know what was inside. Xiao Ju didn't bring many things with him. Since Shen Han wanted to bring them back to Shuo capital, it must be very important. However, she picked up the box and waited. It was too light, as if it didn't contain anything. Could it be empty? It was rare for her to be curious. It shouldn't be Xiao Ju's official documents or letters. He would only carry these things with him. If she opened it, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Shin Mushiwe's fingers rested on the box. She looked outside the carriage. The soldiers were far away, so no one saw her movements. With a click, the box was opened. There were some brushes, inkstones, paperweights, and the like inside. It was just a small thing. She was about to close it when her gaze suddenly froze. After a while, she reached out and took out two things. One was a dough figurine. The dough had already dried, and the color was dark. It was a woman with a charming smile. The other was a wooden carving. In the carving, a warship was capsized, and the fire was fierce. The general standing at the bow of the ship was valiant and valiant. It was a female general. Chapter 183. 10 days later, the group arrived at Jinling. It was different from Jiang's warmth and simplicity, and it was also different from Rundu's solemnity and bleakness. Jinling's city was gentle and affectionate, like a beautiful and elegant lady, stained with a thin layer of pink. The sunlight was clear, the morning sun was romantic, and the soft language of Wunong was filled with music. It was truly a rich and noble village in the human world. Lin Shuanghe couldn't walk as soon as he arrived. He could only look at the delicate lady walking on the street and praise, "This is the immortal cave." No wonder people always say that once you enter Jinling, you don't want to leave. Yan, you said the same thing when you were in Jiang. Lin Shuanghe opened his fan. "Brother I'm just doing as the Romans do when in Rome." Yan, what a good, when in Rome do as the Romans do. When they arrived at Jinling, they naturally had to greet the governor of Jinling's Yingtian prefecture. It wasn't convenient for Yan He's troops to move around freely in the city. Yingtian prefecture had already received the news of Yan He's arrival, so Yan He also went to Yingtian prefecture to receive them first so that he could settle the troops down. Outside Yingtian prefecture, the imperial bodyguards were already waiting outside. There were already people arranged to settle the troops down. Yan was supposed to stand with Wang Ba and the others in the troops team. However, Lin Shuanghe patted her shoulder. "You're now Muan Lang, personally appointed by His Majesty. You're no longer a commoner. Of course, you should be with us. It's a good opportunity to show you the world of officialdom." Yan was speechless. Just as he was about to ask Xiao Ju, and he glanced at her and said, "You're right. Since you have an official position, you should follow us." And he was someone who had his eyes on top of his head and was very difficult to get along with. However, he treated Yan differently. Others were a little surprised, but Yan was well aware that this was all thanks to him degrading He Rufei in front of Yan He, making him feel that he was a rare soulmate in the world. Everyone entered the room together. There was a person sitting in the main hall. When he saw them enter, he stood up. He was wearing the robes of an inspector general. This person was very young and thin. His facial features were delicate and had a hint of determination. He did not look like an inspector general. Instead, he looked like a student of the Imperial College. He stood up and bowed to Yan He. "General's Yan." Then his gaze fell on Xiao Ju, and he was immediately shocked. However, this shock was fleeting and soon turned into shock. Yan was also shocked. He did not expect to meet Yang Mingji here. What kind of coincidence was this? One Xiao Ju, one Lin Shuanghe, one Yan He, and one Yang Mingji. They were her classmates in Xianchang Gymnasium. Lin Shuanghe put down the fan in his hand and picked up the teapot beside him. He poured a cup of tea and handed it to Yan before pouring another cup for himself. He stared at the tea in the teacup, as if he was reminiscing about the past. His voice was light as he said, "Yan Nangguang is like a fighting cock. He's always competing with this and that. He's not close to us. Back in the day, Huaijin and Yang Mingji and I were best friends. Speaking of which, Yang Mingji and Huaijin should be closer than Huaijin and I were." There wasn't the slightest hint of jealousy or dissatisfaction on his face. He only smiled and said, "After all, I'm not good at both civil and military affairs. With Huijin, I can only talk about which family's girls are prettier and which restaurant's dishes are newer. Yang Mingji and Huijin can always talk more than I can. Yang Mingji's health isn't good. When he was young, people secretly said that he was a sissy. Later, when Huijin took him along, no one dared to say that. Ian knew all of this. At that time, she thought that talented people were often similar to talented people. Xiao Zhu and Yang Mingji were both outstanding. No wonder they could become close friends. And then, she asked, and then, Lin Shuanghe lowered his head. His gaze gradually became sad and frustrated. In the year of the Xiao family's accident, the situation in the imperial court was very tense. Xiao Zhongwu died and also bore the crime of incompetent command in the Battle of Mingshui. The Xiao family's collapse was imminent. Prime Minister Su's power in the imperial court became more and more rampant. Although the students in the Xianshan school were all from rich and powerful families, no one dared to speak up for the Xiao family in the teeth of the storm. Except for Lin Shuanghe. His family practiced medicine in the imperial court. Lin Xingtan and Lin Mu didn't care about the matters of the imperial court. Lin Shuanghe had no intention of becoming an official. After learning that the Xiao family had an accident, Lin Shuanghe begged his father and grandfather to say good words for Xiao Zhongwu in front of the emperor. Lin Mu really did say it. His skill in women's medicine was superb. He was also very tactful. Many concubines in the imperial harem had a good relationship with him. Lin Mu picked a few concubines to talk to the emperor for a few days. He didn't mention Xiao Zhongwu's matter. He only said that the two young masters of the Xiao family were pitiful. They were both young talents, but something happened in the Fu. The emperor was also a person who took pity on talents. He was also soft-hearted. As he talked, he really felt that Xiao Jing and Xiao Zhu were pitiful. The crime of the Battle of Mingshui was only focused on Xiao Zhongwu. The Xiao family was not implicated. But just this was not enough. The military power of the South Fu army had not been taken back. These years, I've been running around outside, so I've learned a lot about the secular world. For example, Xiao Huijin's personality is not likable. It's impossible for him to resolve the misunderstanding between Yang Mingji and himself. Yang Mingji isn't that annoying. I'm not doing this for Xiao Huijin. I'm only doing this for Yang Mingji. Seeing that Lin Shuanghe didn't say anything, Yanhe raised his chin. How is it? Do you think I'm very magnanimous? Hurry up and thank me for your close friend. Lin Shuang, I really have to thank you. Yanhe was truly a talent. He sighed in his heart. He was always able to accurately step into Xiao Zhu's forbidden area. No wonder the two of them didn't see eye to eye when they were in the Xianshan mansion. No need to thank me, Yanhe said carelessly. I'll go and tell Chu Xilan. Wait, Lin Shuanghe asked. It's fine if it's Yang Mingji, but why do you have to ask Chu Xilan too? We're all staying here. If he's the only one left, it'll make me look petty. Moreover, as an official, you have to be more tactful. Do you think you're very powerful if you fight like a cockfight? Yanhe sneered. Oh, I forgot. You're not an official, so naturally you don't know these things. He patted Lin Shuanghe's shoulder and walked towards Chu Zhao's courtyard. Lin Shuanghe and Yin looked at each other, speechless. As expected of Yanhe, he pulled in two enemies at once. Yang Mingji wasn't counted. If Chu Zhao was added, Xiao Zhu would probably be angered to death. She might not even follow them. Sister Lin Shuanghe said, why don't you go and tell Huijin? Yin, let's go together. This was going to cost her life. How could she bear it alone? The two of them dragged their feet and struggled for a moment. Finally, they went to Xiao Zhu's room and explained what Yanhe said. They thought that Xiao Zhu would definitely not follow them. Unexpectedly, she turned around and said, okay. At this moment, Yin and Lin Shuanghe were both shocked. She actually agreed just like that, and her expression was so calm. Lin Shuanghe whispered to Yin, he won't wait until we get on the boat and fight with Yang Mingji, right? That's too undignified. Yin, It's very possible. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows slightly. You're not going? Yes, 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 of course we're going. Lin Shuanghe moved closer to Hian's ear and whispered, You have to go. If they fight, remember to stop them. Hian was speechless. After they agreed, they went back to their rooms to change their clothes. They were travel-worn from their journey. Now that they were in Jinling, if they dressed like they were in a hurry to get on the boat, they would look out of place. Hian asked someone to fetch some water. After he took a bath, he changed into a new set of clothes. When they left Rundu, the citizens sent them off with a lot of food and clothes. The material wasn't very expensive, but it was very fitting. Hian looked at himself in the mirror. The youth was wearing a green shirt and cloth boots. His hair was tied into a simple bun, and he had delicate features. He didn't look any different from the students in the Xianchang school in his previous life. She seemed to have grown a bit taller than when she first arrived at the Liangzhou guards. Standing in the room, she was as tall and straight as a poplar tree, young and full of vitality. After he had finished tidying up, he pushed open the door and walked out. As soon as he walked out, he found that everyone had already finished tidying up and was waiting for him outside. And he impatiently said, You're just a little Muan Lang. Why are you so troublesome? There are so many people waiting for you. Are you putting on makeup inside? Ian thought to himself, what a coincidence. She really was putting on makeup inside. A girl pretending to be a man also needed to put in a lot of effort. Xiaoju glanced at him and smiled slightly. Let's go. The residence that Yang Mingji arranged for them wasn't far from the Qinhuai River. As a result, they didn't take a carriage and walk towards the Qinhuai River on their own. Their group was made up of either handsome youths or handsome men. They were particularly eye-catching as they walked on the streets. From time to time, there would be bold girls who pretended to sprain their ankles and lean forward. However, Xiaoju didn't like to come into contact with people, so he naturally avoided them. And he wasn't the type to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He already left some leeway by not reprimanding or punishing them. Chu Zhao had a beautiful servant girl by his side, so those girls were treated. In the end, the ones who suffered were Lin Shuanghe and Hian. Hian couldn't remember how many beautiful girls he had helped. It was just that those girls looked at him with tender gazes that made it hard for him to resist. For a moment, he felt that it was better to be as innocent and cute as Song Tao Tao. Lin Shuanghe was the same. He didn't know how many times he called Mimi, and he looked at the two of them with schadenfreude and said to Lin Shuanghe, after so many years, I didn't expect you to still be so popular with women. Lin Shuanghe tidied his slightly wrinkled robe and smiled slightly. Of course, just like how you're always disliked by women. And he snorted, I already have a wife. I don't need to be liked by others. He instilled and looked at General Yin. General Yin is already married? When he said this, Xiao Ju and Chu Zhao both looked at Hian. Lin Shuanghe opened his fan. You didn't expect this, right? Our General Yin is still young. It's a pity that he got married at such a young age. I think you were jealous. And he sneered. Hian was a little strange.